Chapter 721. Was it cruel? Not really. At least that was what Yiqing Luo felt. If Yiqing Qian knew her place and enjoyed the peace that Ling Fengying had obtained for her. At least before they revealed that the child was pregnant and Ling Fengying had taken over, Yiqing Luo didn't have the time to bother about their trivial matters. All these were Yiqing Qian's own fault. There was a limit to one's tolerance. Last time, Ling Fengying and the three old ministers had watched Yiqing Qian and Ling Fenghua's live broadcast. Yiqing Qian totally didn't know how to restrain herself. Then, let her be ruined in front of thousands of people. As long as Yiqing Qian still had a little bit of pride, she should learn to be smart. Yiqing Luo threw her handkerchief onto the ground. She turned her head and looked at the dumbstruck Yi Fengyu as she spoke calmly. "Little Yu, don't you feel that your eyes are dirty?" Yi Fengyu was still in a daze when he suddenly heard Yiqing Luo's voice as he nodded his head vigorously. "So dirty. Since it's dirty, why are you still standing here for?" Yiqing Luo's voice sunk. Yi Fengyu suddenly regained his senses as he immediately shook his head and followed behind Yiqing Luo. Yiqing Luo turned around and left without even turning her head back. Yiqing Qian's outcome was witnessed by the surrounding students. On seeing Yiqing Luo walking over, they all opened up a path. All of them were breathing carefully. 7th Miss Yi. Ling Fengying stood in a daze on the spot as he looked at Yiqing Luo's departing figure and subconsciously wanted to call out to her. Yiqing Luo didn't turn back. But she stopped in her tracks. She is, after all, your elder sister. Even if her nonsense hurt your friend, but you shouldn't do it in front of so many people. Ling Fengying's facial muscles twitched slightly. Before this, he had accepted Yiqing Qian by his side and had always declared to the public that he pitied her. After eldest royal brother experienced this matter, his mental state became extremely tyrannical and he would beat Yiqing Qian up whenever he wanted. Every time he saw Yiqing Qian covered in wounds, he simply couldn't bear it. Moreover, the matter that day was because he had led the old minister to the crown prince palace which led to such a thing happening. He took another look at Yiqing Qian's body and hugged her. Such an excuse would not only make the other old officials and commoners more or less accept it, but it would also make the old officials and commoners feel that the second prince was a kind-hearted person. They would support him even more. But Yiqing Luo had shown Yiqing Qian's naked body in front of thousands of people. He could no longer use pity as an excuse. It wasn't that he was kind-hearted or benevolent, he was stupid to the extreme. Yiqing Luo turned her head back and gave a slight smile. Her long and narrow eyes sparkled with an innocent and harmless luster. "Anyway, she's already shameless, isn't it? In fact, I admire her courage. She was able to straighten her chest in the face of so many rumors and slanders, pretending that nothing had happened and putting on an unreachable appearance." Her tone was very sincere. But at first glance, it seemed like he was mocking something. But, after she mustered up her courage and walked out of the darkness, she still refused to be left out and let me ride her. So, don't blame me for treating her like one human. Ride. Something like that. Yiqing Luo raised her brows. Her long curly eyelashes were like butterfly wings, forming a shadow under her eyelids. She obviously looked like a peerless beauty, but the words she said made one tremble in fear. "Since second prince likes to pick up trash, then hurry up and pick up this trash back, don't let her embarrass herself here." Saying that, Yiqing Luo left in an extremely suave and straightforward manner. Not too long later, she had already disappeared at the corner in front. The surrounding students heaved a sigh of relief because of Yiqing Luo's departure. Chapter 722. Yiqing Luo didn't leave immediately. After turning the corner, Yiqing Luo dragged Yi Fengyu and stood against the wall. She raised her index finger to her lips, indicating Yi Fengyu not to open his mouth temporarily. Following that, Her figure was as light as a feather as she leapt onto the roof. She squinted her eyes as she stared intently at the naked Yiqing Qian, who was lying on the ground unable to move. Earlier, when Yiqing Luo was clutching Yiqing Qian's neck, the silver needle hidden in her fingertips had already pierced into Yiqing Qian's acupuncture point. If she didn't remove the silver needle, Yiqing Qian would not be able to move for the rest of her life. The current Yiqing Qian, because she had lost her life, the black qi had automatically integrated into her pupils, totally not a trace of it could be seen. Yiqing Luo looked carefully for some time but didn't detect any trace of the dark force's presence. "Lass, are you trying to dig out the dark forces behind Yiqing Qian?" Old man Sang's voice rang in her mind. Yiqing Luo was releasing her perception as she carefully scanned every corner of the academy's surroundings, while replying to Old Man Sang's words with her underworld god. "The people from the dark forces are much stronger than what I had imagined. I have no intention to go head-on against the dark forces." Yiqing Qian could freely use her dark force's profound yin qi and could control it to carry out attacks. It was enough to show that her position in the dark forces wasn't low. Then today, she had made such a big embarrassment in the academy and exposed the black smoke like profound yin qi. The students present were young and didn't understand. But there was no lack of elders from the older generation who came over to fetch their own young masters and young ladies. There were also elders and guards who had more experience in the academy. Naturally, there would be someone who would detect the source of the black qi. It was impossible for the dark forces to hide in the dark like in the past. After a long time, the dark forces who were expelled from Nirvana Realm had once again appeared in Nirvana Realm. Not knowing what kind of uproar would be stirred up in Nirvana Realm after this news was spread. He did not know how the dark forces would deal with the news that the dark forces had returned to the Nirvana Realm. How would Yiqing Qian, who had exposed her profound yin qi, be treated? "Stop looking, I can't sense the dark force's presence in the surroundings." Old Man Song naturally knew what Yiqing Luo was thinking as he directly dispelled her thoughts. Yiqing Luo frowned slightly. Old Man Song continued, "For these 3 days of training, try your best to stay with your team. If Dmo Xian is by your side, that would be even better." Yiqing Luo was stunned. "You mean? The dark forces have always been hiding in the dark. Today, because of you, the news of the dark forces returning to the Nirvana Realm has been exposed." That was to say, even if Yiqing Luo were to lie in wait in the academy, for the sake of safety, the dark forces would definitely not show up at this time. Whereas for Yiqing Luo to expose the dark forces, she would definitely be attacked by the dark forces. "Girl, after this holiday training ends, you can challenge the second floor of the Purgatory Tower." Old Man Song hesitated for a long time before forcefully saying these words. Actually, Old Man Song wanted to wait for Yiqing Luo to have the ability to win before challenging the second story. However, at that time, even if he succeeded in the challenge, the effect would not be too great. Yiqing Luo belonged to the type of person who grew braver the more she suffered. The stronger her opponent was, the stronger she would be. It would be better to wait for the holiday training to end and maintain that state before challenging the second level. Not only would it stimulate Yiqing Luo's growth, it might even allow her to have an epiphany and advance at the juncture of life and death. Yiqing Luo's eyes lit up as she smiled widely. "Good. I will train well and fight for my best state to challenge the second floor of the Purgatory Tower." Chapter 723. Yiqing Luo and Yifeng Yu held hands as they returned to Three Springs Sect. Three Springs Sect's entrance was much bigger than last month's. Madame Yuchi led a bunch of maids as they waited at the entrance. Even the high and mighty old madam was sitting on a soft chair by the side. There were at least 40 over people in total. "Sister." Yifeng Yu was stunned by this lineup. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she carefully sized up Madame Yuchi's expression as her lips curled into a cold arc. "Don't worry, just watch the show." When Madame Yuchi looked at her, there was a stiff smile on her face. But Madame Yuchi's eyes were filled with intense hatred and resentment. As though she couldn't wait to tear her into pieces. Probably. What happened at the Academy's entrance was known by everyone in Three Springs sect. Otherwise, if it was just to welcome Yiqing Qian, old Madame would absolutely not be sitting here. Madame Yuchi would also not reveal this. A twisted smile. Seeing Yiqing Luo and her brother, under old Madame's threatening gaze, Madame Yuchi smiled benevolently as she swayed her slender waist and walked over leisurely. 7th Miss, 8th Young Master, it's been hard on you this 1 month in the Academy. Her tone was filled with a thick flattery. She walked towards Yiqing Luo and stretched out her hand in an attempt to hold Yiqing Luo's arm, putting on a look of a loving mother doting on her daughter. Since half a month ago, old Madame has been nagging about you and 8th Young Master's holiday, hoping for the stars and the moon. Finally you're back. However, Yiqing Luo's body moved slightly as she avoided Madame Yuchi's outstretched hand. Madame Yuchi's hand froze in midair. But after all, she was mother and daughter to Yiqing Qian. Being thick-skinned was their specialty. Even if it was awkward, Madame Yuchi's smile didn't change at all as she held onto Yi Fengyu's arm and continued smiling. Last month, you and 8th Young Master finally had a holiday, but you didn't spend it in the residence. Old Madame wanted to dote on you but didn't have this chance. This holiday, give old Madame a chance to stay at home and accompany old Madame. Yi Fengyu wasn't as agile as Yiqing Luo as he stood rooted to the ground. Obviously, she was stunned by Madame Yuchi's fawning attitude. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as her vision was fixed on Madame Yuchi's hand, which was holding onto Yi Fengyu's arm as she narrowed her eyes. Second concubine, the person whom you want to dote on is currently in Second Prince's residence, receiving Second Prince's banquet. His gaze was as sharp as a knife. Madame Yuchi immediately let go of Yi Fengyu and shrank back. Hearing Yiqing Luo's words, that fawning smile on his face stiffened. Madame Yuchi was on the verge of going crazy after receiving the news brought back by the servant. Her eldest daughter, the eldest daughter she had always been proud of, Yiqing Luo had actually exposed the news of her pregnancy in front of thousands of people, and even exposed her eldest daughter completely naked in front of everyone. Completely ruined the relationship between Yiqing Qian and the second prince. Madame Yuchi hated Yiqing Luo. To Madame Yuchi, Yiqing Luo was the murderer who ruined her daughter. If it wasn't for Yiqing Luo, Yiqing Ling wouldn't have been destroyed and chased out of Three Springs sect residence, not knowing if she was dead or alive. If it wasn't for Yiqing Luo, Yiqing Qian would be the high and mighty crown princess, the most envied woman in the West Continent. Everything was Yiqing Luo's fault. If it wasn't for the fact that she no longer had a daughter to rely on. If it wasn't for the fact that old Madame used Three Springs sect's authority to threaten her. Chapter 724. But Yiqing Luo didn't understand her forbearance at all. She even brought up the matter of Yiqing Qian and the second prince in front of her. Yiqing Luo had lost all her face because of Yiqing Luo. From today onwards, Yiqing Qian's drawing would appear in countless brochures. How could the second prince possibly set up a banquet to entertain Yiqing Qian? Even if the second prince really loved Yiqing Qian, he would absolutely not block his own future to be with Yiqing Qian. Looking at the entire royal family, only the second prince could take on the heavy responsibility of the monarch. How would the current monarch allow the woman who was ridiculed by the common people to become the second prince's imperial concubine? Even if Yiqing Qian was willing to be the second prince's concubine, the monarch would never agree. Yiqing Luo was totally rubbing salt on the wound in her heart. If Yiqing Luo knew what Madame Yuchi was thinking, she would definitely scoff. Did she need to understand Madame Yuchi's forbearance? Did Madame Yuchi's lowly status have anything to do with her? In the end, it was because she had lost her daughter, and in order to survive in Three Springs sect, she disregarded her pride to please her. It was just for herself, a selfish act. Could she be blamed? Number 7, Number 8, come and help Grandma in. Just when the atmosphere was extremely quiet, old Grandmadam's hoarse voice came into everyone's ears. Yi Fengyu heard and immediately went forward. An old woman took over his luggage from him. Yi Fengyu respectfully held old Grandmadam's left hand and helped her up from the soft chair. Yi Qingluo didn't go over, but didn't stop Yi Fengyu either. She just walked on her own way and walked into Three Springs sect. Yi Qingluo wasn't an unreasonable person. Because of her hatred towards the Yi family, she denied the blood relationship between these people and her and Yi Fengyu. For old Grandmadam who didn't know how to respect others, Yi Qingluo didn't want to give her the same respect. But she wouldn't be so deranged to not allow Yi Fengyu to show his respect. After all, Yi Fengyu was different from her. In this family, father and old Grandmadam treated him quite well. Since young, he had been taught to give for the Yi family and to respect all the Yi family's elders. The old ancestor was not angry. Supported by Yi Fengyu, the majestic group of people entered the Three Springs sect mansion. Old 7, you've been admitted to the Heavenly Academy for such a long time, but you haven't gone to the ancestral hall to explain to your mother. After dinner, go to the ancestral hall and have a heart-to-heart with your mother. The old ancestor's voice was calm and gentle, no longer as cold and stern as before. Ancestral hall. The old ancestor actually asked her to go to the ancestral hall. One had to know that she, the so-called daughter of the first wife, did not even have the opportunity to enter the ancestral hall. Even if he was punished, the place he stayed the most was the woodshed. In the old ancestor's words, that was, "You're a good-for-nothing who doesn't even have a shred of Xian Qi. What right do you have to enter the Yi family's ancestral hall?" In old Grandmadam's eyes, she had never treated Yi Qingluo as a part of the Yi family. Just because she was a good-for-nothing with no cultivation foundation. Today, the old ancestor actually allowed her to enter the ancestral hall and allowed her to talk to her mother. Sure enough, the older, the wiser. The minute she opened her mouth, she poked at Yi Qingluo's soft spot. Entering the ancestral hall and burning incense for her mother had always been what Yi Qingluo wanted to do. There were several times when Yi Qingluo wanted to sneak into the ancestral hall and talk to her mother's memorial arch, but she was beaten out by the servant who guarded the ancestral hall. The old Grandmadam's words were to express goodwill to her. Express goodwill. Chapter 725. Now, looking at the entire Three Springs sect. The only woman who could be used by Three Springs sect was Yi Qingluo alone. Yi Qingqian was ruined. Yi Qingling's life or death was unknown. Only this seventh miss, who everyone looked down upon, had become the winner today. Not only did she push the Yi family who went against her to this state, she was also doing well in the Heavenly Academy. Old Madam naturally knew who was the target whom the Yi family wanted to please. However, Yi Qingluo was no longer the Yi Qingluo of the past. She would not forget all those things which had brought her endless pain just because of a little goodwill from Old Madam. Trying to bribe her with a mere ancestral hall. Old Madam's thinking was too simple. What's more, even if she wanted to go to the ancestral hall now, who could stop her? Seeing Yi Qingluo not speaking for a long time, Madame Yuqi, who was following closely behind, finally found a source to vent the anger which was suppressed in her heart. "Seventh miss, Old Madam is wholeheartedly thinking for you, and this is the attitude you use to treat Old Madam? Where's the etiquette which Grandpa taught you since young?" That pretended to be gentle and elegant face was now twisted and sinister, with a vicious look in between her brows. Yi Qingluo stopped in her tracks. Old Madam and Yi Fengyu, who was behind her, also stopped in their tracks. A row of over 40 people turned their heads in unison and looked towards Madame Yuqi. Madame Yuqi saw that Old Madam had also stopped in her tracks, thinking that Old Madam was unable to suppress her anger towards Yi Qingluo and wanted to go along with her. A smirk of gloating sneer surfaced on her face. "You look like a wild child who was born without a mother." But 7th Miss, you are after all the daughter of Three Springs sect's first wife, and the future sect master. Every action and every word you say represents Three Springs sect. While speaking, old Madam's gaze became increasingly sinister, that wrinkled old face faintly twitched. She was about to berate. However, he was stopped by a small white hand. Yi-Ching Luo smiled sweetly and shook her head at old Madam. Let her finish. Old Grand Madam wanted to get into Yi-Ching Luo's good books so naturally she wouldn't refute her request. Elder Madam did not stop her. Madam Yuchi's eyes became colder and colder. 7th young lady, how about this? I will find a few royal aunts to teach you etiquette. Don't embarrass the Yi family. After that, he smiled in the direction of the elder ancestor. Elder ancestor, don't you agree? The elder ancestor's fingers that held the walking stick tightened, and his eagle eyes flashed with a sharp luster. After staring at Madame Yuchi for a long time, Madame Yuchi, whose eyes were blinded by hatred, could not sense her ancestor's emotions. She did not receive the message from the elder ancestor telling her to shut up. Just at this moment, Yi-Ching Luo had already walked past old Grand Madam, walking directly towards Madame Yuchi. Madame Yuchi was so scared that she trembled and her legs went soft. Etiquette. Do you think you have the face to talk to me about etiquette? Yi-Ching Luo squinted her cold eyes as her lips curled upwards, curling into a cold arc of ridicule, talking about throwing the Yi family's face. Eldest sister who was born by her father and taught by her mother is totally deserving of it. She slowly raised her hand as she gently patted Madame Yuchi's shoulder, with an indifferent expression, but indeed you can't blame eldest sister. All these, eldest sister had learned from second concubine. Take a look, snatching her own sister's man, flirting with a man regardless of the occasion, and even shamelessly seducing her ex-man's younger brother. TSK, only second concubine is able to teach such a perfect female chick. Chapter 726. The surrounding maids and old maids naturally understood the meaning behind Yi-Ching Luo's words. That's right. As a mother, wasn't she the typical shameless one? Knowing that patriarchy had a wife, she still shamelessly stuck close to him, willingly becoming patriarchy as concubine, instigating patriarch to favor his concubine over his wife. Indeed, like mother like daughter. Both mother and daughter were the same. Madame Yuchi had not expected Yi-Ching Luo to use such a method to counter her. Being a concubine was indeed not a glorious thing to say. But in the entire Three Springs city, those men with potential, which one of them didn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? What did she do wrong? Madame Yuchi's face instantly turned pale, as she was so infuriated that her heart almost bled. She had to admit that Yi-Ching Qian was Madame Yuchi's biological daughter. Even the habit of not daring to take responsibility for her mistakes, and pushing all the mistakes onto others, was exactly the same. Yi-Ching Luo. If it wasn't for you. If it wasn't for my daughter, how would she become like this? Madame Yuchi couldn't hold it in as she howled and pounced over. She stretched out her fingers, as she angrily tried to tear Yi-Ching Luo's hair. Men, bring Madame Yuchi down. Lock her in the firewood room and starve for 3 days. Old Madame raged as she berated sternly. A few chorus maids immediately rushed up and held on to Madame Yuchi, as they dragged her towards the direction of the firewood room. Madame Yuchi seemed as though she had gone mad, as she kept twisting her body and struggling. She was screaming Yi-Ching Luo's name at the top of her voice. If ordinary people heard that voice, they would feel that they were being haunted by a malicious spirit. Those chorus maids were mostly the guards who followed the Yi family's womenfolk, as they were strong and their profound grades weren't low. No matter how Madame Yuchi struggled, she was still forcefully brought down. Number 7, don't take Madame Yuchi's words to heart. Go have lunch with Grandma happily. Grandma has prepared a table full of good dishes for you. Old Madame retracted her gaze, as that wrinkled old face slowly smoothed out. Even her usually sinister eyes revealed an elderly's gentleness. Looking at old Madam in this state, it really had the feeling of a grandmother caring for her grandchildren. Yi-Ching Luo scoffed. Soon after, she stretched out her slender fingers and pressed on the space between her eyebrows. Her face revealed some exhaustion. Ancestor, I'm afraid that I won't have the appetite to eat this meal. In order to prevent Ancestor from losing his appetite and affecting Ancestor's body, I won't eat anymore. Without waiting for the elder Ancestor's response, he waved his hand and walked toward his courtyard. The old Ancestor's face instantly darkened. His slender and sinister eyes narrowed slightly. Her brows were tightly knitted together, making her wrinkled old face look even more eerie and terrifying. Yi Fengyu, who was standing at the side, had originally wanted to apologize on his sister's behalf and accompany the old Ancestor for a meal. After all, the current Yi family did not seem like a family anymore. Father came home less and less. Her brothers did not return home at all. In the huge Three Springs sect residence, only the other 3 concubines accompanied the elder Ancestor during meals. As a grandson, he naturally wanted to have a meal with his grandmother. But, at this moment, seeing old Madam staring at his sister's back view, Yi Fengyu's heart thumped. Old Madam still hated his sister. She did not treat his sister as one of her own because of her achievements today. Old Madam pretended to be benevolent in front of his sister, but obviously she had an ulterior motive. Old Madam wanted to make use of his sister. Chapter 727. Could it be that sister had seen through old Grand Madam's intention right from the start? Yi Fengyu really couldn't understand. Why did old Grand Madam and father hate sister so much? If it was before, sister was unable to cultivate to the profound grade and had embarrassed the Yi family, causing old Grand Madam and father to hate her, there was still a reason. But now, sister was the most outstanding child in the Yi family. She had the ability to become the future patriarch of Three Springs sect. Shouldn't father and old Grand Madam be happy? Why, his sister had clearly become stronger and had already met their requirements. Were they still unable to treat her as a family? His feelings of shielding his own people welled up in his heart, and Yi Fengyu immediately lost his appetite. He let go of old Grand Madam's hand. The young man still didn't know how to conceal his emotions. He shook his head and said, "Old Grand Madam, I'm tired too. I'll go back to the courtyard to rest and accompany you tonight." Old Eighth. Old Grand Madam's face turned even uglier. Even the usually obedient number 8 had been poisoned by Yi-Ching Luo, that wild lass. Yi-Ching Luo had just arrived at the entrance of the courtyard when she saw 2 maids bowing respectfully and welcoming her into the courtyard. At this moment, the courtyard was decorated with countless precious and beautiful flowers. The trees were green and full of vitality. There were also 3 maids trimming the flowers in the courtyard. Upon hearing footsteps, the maids stopped what they were doing and stood up one after another as they bowed respectfully to Yi-Ching Luo. "Welcome home 7th Mississippi." This lineup was definitely not smaller than the one at Three Springs sect's entrance when 40 over maids welcomed her. Another masterpiece from old Grand Madam. After entering the main hall, another 2 maids were diligently wiping the things in the main hall. The main hall had been refurbished and filled with precious porcelain. 7th Miss, these are all treasures personally selected by old Grand Madam. Each piece is worth 1,000 gold. 7th Miss can take a look, and if there's anything you don't like, I will change it for 7th Mississippi, the maid said respectfully and attentively. 7th Miss was the first in the entire residence to receive such treatment. Even the previous eldest Miss had not enjoyed such treatment. It could be seen that from today onwards, Miss 7th's position in the Three Springs sect would truly be able to enjoy the privileges of a young sect lord. However, when Yi-Ching Luo surveyed the surroundings, she didn't see the joyous expression which these maids had imagined. Instead, she furrowed her brows tightly as her beautiful face instantly darkened. Yiqing Luo speedily turned around and headed towards the direction of her bedroom. Damn it! She knew that the elder ancestor who was unaccountably solicitous must be hiding evil intentions. Sure enough, he had an ulterior motive. On the surface, old ancestor had replaced everything in her courtyard with incomparably precious treasures and porcelain. In reality, old ancestor was just using this as an excuse to search for the things in her courtyard. She had been a good-for-nothing for more than 10 years and was not favored at all in the room of the young sect master. What could there be that was worth old ancestor going through so much trouble? There was only one answer. That was, the 2 letters that her mother left for her. The elder ancestor's goal was the map and the letter. Sure enough, not far from the bedroom, they heard Ziling yelling at the top of her voice, "None of you are allowed to enter Mrs. bedroom. What do you want to exchange for? Give it to me, I will exchange for Miss." Chapter 728. No one is allowed to enter Mrs. bedroom. If you don't give it to me, don't even think about stepping through the door today. Ziling persistently opened her arms and blocked the door of the bedroom. Her pretty little face was full of anger. Before Miss left, she specifically handed the courtyard to her to take care of. She had no ability and failed to live up to Mrs. expectations. She let the second madam arrange the maids to renovate the whole place from front to back. The bedroom must not yield even half a step. Even if Ziling had never been to school, she knew that the bedroom was a person's biggest secret space. Before Miss left, she asked her to look after the courtyard. It must be because there was something in the courtyard that could not be touched by anyone except her. A few of the maidservants looked angry. Behind them, there were 2 maidservants who looked delicate but extremely agile. They rushed forward and grabbed Ziling's arms from both sides. "Gotcha!" Ziling screamed in pain. Both of her arms were directly fractured by the strength of the 2 maidservants' grip. The maid holding the red quilt sneered. "Do you really think you are Miss Seven's personal maid? Do you really think that when Miss Seven becomes the master, you, a cripple, can follow her to success? You are crippled and can't do anything. Will Miss Seven want you? Don't think too highly of yourself." She strode over, freed a hand, and ruthlessly swung it at Ziling's face. Bang! There was a loud noise. The red quilt suddenly flew and fell to the ground with the wind. Soon after, a petite body tumbled a few times in the air and smashed heavily onto the red quilt. The maid who fell to the ground spat out a mouthful of blood and twitched in pain. The eyes of the 2 maids who held Ziling flashed, and they stared in the direction of the attack in horror. What they saw was a figure like a flame, walking slowly. She had her hands behind her back, and her red dress was like a flame. When she walked, the skirt fluttered like a phoenix spreading its wings, like a blooming rose. Her steps were light, elegant and noble. Miss Seven, the faces of the 2 maids immediately turned pale. They let go of Ziling's arms and knelt down with a thud. "7th Miss, please spare our lives. 7th Miss, please spare our lives. Things are not what you think." Ziling, who had lost her support, went limp and fell to the ground. In the next second, her petite body was caught by a slender arm. Ziling's face contorted in pain. In a daze, she smelled a familiar fragrance. She forced her eyes open, and when she saw the familiar face that she had been longing for, a warm smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. "Miss Ling has finally waited for you." This smile, this light voice, made Yiqing Luo's heart tremble fiercely. The slender fingers that were clasped on Ziling's shoulders tightened one by one. She smiled gently and said, "I'm back." When he looked up again, he focused on the 2 maidservants. Her brows became cold, and a cold light flashed in her long and narrow eyes. The smile at the corner of his mouth was gradually replaced by a frosty coldness. "It's not your turn to teach my people a lesson. Yiqing Luo's cold voice was like a ghost. As for whether Ling will follow me to a meteoric rise, it's not your turn to speculate. Yiqing Luo paused and lifted her foot to hook the chin of one of the maidservants. Who gave you the courage to speculate about the master's thoughts? The maidservant shivered, her body shivering, and she kept apologizing profusely. Chapter 729. Ziling heard Yiqing Luo's words in a daze and her eyes suddenly flashed. Remember. Ling remembers. She would never forget what her young miss had said. Miss would not keep useless people by her side. If she wanted to stay by her miss's side, she must be able to become her miss's helper. Miss had said that those who had bullied them should fight back fiercely. Since those people had the guts to bully them, they should face the consequences. Otherwise, it would hurt Miss. Every single sentence that Yiqing Luo had once said flashed past his mind. Ziling suddenly felt that her mind was becoming clearer. The heart-wrenching pain in his arm also seemed to have dissipated. Remember, let me see if you have placed these words in your heart. Yiqing Luo slowly lowered her head and stuck it to her ear. Her bewitching voice was faintly discernible and clear. Ziling's cold eyes were gradually covered with a layer of murderous intent. She slowly walked towards the two maids. The maids' faces suddenly turned pale and their eyes widened in horror. Looking at Ziling, who was completely different from before, their hearts actually gave birth to a sense of fear. Yiqing Luo crossed her arms over her chest and directly retreated to the side. Ziling picked up a flower pot from the ground and limped to the front of the maids. She lifted the flower pot in her hand and smashed it hard on the maid's head. The maidservant let out a blood-curdling screech as she fell to the ground, bleeding profusely. Yiqing Luo nodded with satisfaction. It was already very good for Ziling to have such progress. After the sound of the flower pot breaking, Ziling suddenly came back to her senses. Seeing the maid on the ground clutching her head and rolling in pain, Ziling raised her hands and looked at them blankly. This is what I did. Wait a minute, weren't her hands fractured? Why suddenly, Ziling's eyes suddenly widened and quickly turned to look at the miss who was standing behind her and smiling at her. Just now. Young miss had only lightly pinched her two arms. She was in so much pain that she wanted to die, but the pain suddenly disappeared. Her mind also became much clearer. Even his fractured hands had recovered to normal. Yiqing Luo smiled and nodded. Ling, well done. Ziling's eyes were filled with tears after receiving the praise from her mistress. Continue, let them know, in my courtyard, what kind of status do you have? Yiqing Luo continued speaking. Ziling understood that Miss was helping her establish her authority in the Three Springs sect. In Ziling's heart, other than Miss and Eighth Young Master, everyone else was someone who harbored ill intentions towards Mississippi. Even if she didn't like this power, for the sake of her mistress, she had to take advantage of her position to bully others. Ziling had already made a vow when she personally fed that bowl of poison porridge into the mouth of Aunt Zhang, who wanted to kill Mississippi. For the young miss, even if her hands were stained with blood, she would not hesitate. Because of this, she wasn't as afraid as before. Ziling's face was gloomy. She glared at the old women kneeling on the side and snorted coldly. Didn't you hear what Miss said? Capture these 3 lowly servants who offended Miss and send them to the courtyard at the back. I will teach them a lesson on behalf of Miss. Those old women had never expected that Ziling, who had always been easy to bully, would show such a fierce side. Thinking back to the scene of Ziling smashing the maid with the flower pot, and then looking at Yiqing Luo standing calmly at the side. Obviously, Ziling's behavior was inspired by the 7th Mississippi. These old women were all shrewd people. At this time, they didn't care that these 3 people were from the 2nd household. Chapter 730. Ziling bowed to Yiqing Luo. Miss Ling, will go over now." Yiqing Luo waved her hand, yawned and pinched her eyebrows tiredly. "Come to the bedroom after you're done and keep an eye on me. No one is allowed to disturb me." After a pause, her charming eyes flashed coldly. "Including the old ancestor?" Ziling was startled and immediately nodded. "Yes, miss." Yiqing Luo yawned and entered the bedroom. The moment she closed the door, the exhaustion on her face suddenly disappeared. Her courtyard was now filled with spies. Not only the Yuchi clan's people, but also the people arranged by old madam. Could it be that they were really after the map in her hands? Impossible. This thought had just crossed her mind, but was instantly rejected by Yiqing Luo. After all, she was the only one who had read the letter left by her mother. Obviously, old madam didn't know about the secret of the letter and the map. Otherwise, she would have been threatened and bribed when Yiqing Luo was still young. Coaxing a child, especially a child who lacked love, was much easier than using carrot and stick to think of a solution. Today, this move of killing the chicken to warn the monkey was also a threat to those spies. Yiqing Luo returned to the ward, immediately lay down on the bed and immediately entered the azure dew bracelet. Old man Song was already sitting next to the dragon god cauldron waiting for her. "Master, are you sure you want to refine the bone healing pill now?" A loud and clear voice came from inside the dragon god cauldron. Yiqing Luo took out the prepared herbs and placed them in front of the dragon god cauldron. Yes. This was the only purpose of her return to the Yi family. To cure Ziling's leg. The dragon god cauldron shook for a while and saw a golden light pass by. Detailed steps of the bone healing pill quickly appeared in the air. So detailed that the number of herbs to put in was clearly written. Yiqing Luo quickly skimmed through the steps. Therefore, she could already recite the prescription of the bone healing pill backwards. But after all, there was only one chance, so it was better to be careful. The herbs used in the bone healing pill, profound ice immortal root and infant grass were extremely rare herbs, which meant that the bone healing pill belonged to the highest grade. If it was the previous Yiqing Luo, controlling the legendary grade dragon god cauldron, she would absolutely be unable to do so. However, he had gone through torturous training under the hands of a medicine ancestor level alchemist. The current Yiqing Luo, no matter if it was flame control or pill refining skills, had already made huge improvements. Yiqing Luo sat cross-legged in front of the dragon god cauldron, as she placed the medicinal herbs into the cauldron in an orderly manner. Then, he opened his palm and slammed it towards the direction of his heart. Clusters of flames sizzled in her palms. That flame was different from the usual flames. Instead, it was a kind of red, like fresh blood. Yiqing Luo threw the originally palm-sized ball of flame towards the direction of the cauldron. In a split second, that flame burned extremely vigorously, completely covering the cauldron which occupied half of the space inside the azure dew bracelet. The entire cauldron seemed to be covered in a layer of blood. Blood flowed beautifully. This was an extremely pure, profound jade heart flame. People who possessed this kind of heart fire could be said to be natural-born alchemists. Old man Song saw it extremely clearly from the side. Under the cover of the hazy white spiritual qi, that pair of eyes that had experienced the vicissitudes of life, was suffused with a trace of faint gratification. This lass was indeed intelligent, a person who was born to become an alchemist. To tell the truth, it could be said that through his guidance, Yiqing Luo was personally pushed by him to be someone else's disciple. Old man Song actually rejected it in his heart. But, for Yiqing Luo's future, he could only let go. Chapter 731. After a while, the entire azure dew bracelet was surrounded by a faint medicinal fragrance. This medicinal fragrance was different from other medicinal fragrances. It was extremely fresh and elegant. If an ordinary person smelled it, their whole body would be relaxed and extremely satisfied. The medicinal fragrance became more and more intense and gradually overflowed from the azure dew bracelet. Ziling, who had finished dealing with the three maids, was standing at the bedroom door in high spirits, carefully observing the surrounding situation. No one was allowed to approach the bedroom. Suddenly, he smelled the fragrance of the refined medicine coming from inside the room. Her heart jumped, afraid that her miss was injured and secretly bandaged in the room. As soon as she rushed into the room, she saw a scene that she would never forget for the rest of her life. Yiqing Luo was lying on the bed, a trace of enchanting red light seeping out from Yiqing Luo's wrist little by little. In the blink of an eye, her whole body was shrouded in red light. It was Ziling's first time seeing such a situation and she was frightened. The scent of medicine filled Ziling's nose. She did not know what her miss was doing now. But being in the Three Springs sect, Ziling knew that she must not disturb her miss at this time, let alone let others disturb her Mississippi. Ziling became more alert and guarded the door for her Mississippi. At this moment, the person on the bed suddenly sat up straight like a spring. Ziling, who had just stepped out of the bedroom, was startled. She turned her head and met a pair of enchanting red eyes, enchanting and seductive. Ziling was dumbfounded on the spot. Yiqing Luo closed her eyes and suppressed the profound qi that was stirred up by the medicinal refinement. When he opened his eyes again, the red light in his eyes had already disappeared. Miss. The little girl was still in a daze. Yiqing Luo's lips curled up and waved at Ziling. Ziling walked over in a daze. Yiqing Luo flipped her palm and took out a delicate wooden box from somewhere and handed it to Ziling. Ziling blinked her eyes, puzzled. For you. Ziling did not understand and obediently took it. But if it was a gift from her miss, she would keep it well, even if it was a pile of shit. Under Yiqing Luo's instruction, Ziling opened the wooden box. Inside the wooden box was a sparkling and translucent medicinal pill. The entire room was instantly filled with the fragrance of medicine. Ziling stared at the elixir in the wooden box and stared at it for a long time. Miss, why, bone healing pill. Yiqing Luo said concisely, after taking it, I will perform acupuncture on you for 2 days and your leg will be healed. Completely healed. Ziling's eyes widened in disbelief. She tightened her grip on the wooden box. Yiqing Luo nodded with a smile, I promised you that I will cure your leg. Soon after, the little girl closed the wooden box with wild joy and hugged it in her arms. She was so excited that tears rolled down from the corner of her eyes. Joy couldn't be used to describe his current mood. Especially when he saw the young Mrs. Gentle smile, he couldn't help but sob. Her young mistress had actually remembered the promise she had made to her deeply in her heart and had even taken action to fulfill it. How lucky was she to have such a master who doted on her. Ziling's tearful eyes suddenly became firm. She knelt on the ground with a thud and kowtowed to Yiqing Luo fiercely. Miss, Ziling will follow in your footsteps forever. Chapter 732. A long time later, she, who was already known as Fairy Ziling, was asked what was the reason for her rapid growth from a crippled maid to become Yiqing Luo's right-hand man. Ziling Fairy said that she would never forget her miss's warm palm on top of her head, dispelling the frost in her heart for more than 10 years. It was her own miss who gave her enough courage. Gave her the courage to stand by Yiqing Luo's side. Not worried about being abandoned, not worried about being abandoned. After Ziling had taken the bone healing pill, Yiqing Luo had started the treatment with acupuncture and profound qi. On the day before the holiday, Yiqing Luo specially looked for Ghost Doctor to carefully confirm the treatment process. At this time, Yiqing Luo's hands were smooth, calm, and quickly and accurately inserted the acupuncture points. This kind of acupuncture, every needle was as painful as scraping the bone. Yi Qing Luo had inserted a total of 91 needles. Ziling was completely in pain, her face was pale and her head was full of cold sweat. But from the beginning to the end, Ziling stubbornly did not make any sound. Not even a cry of pain. Yi Qing Luo withdrew her hand and wiped the sweat on her face. Looking at Ziling, who was biting the white cloth and breathing heavily, the smile in her eyes became more gentle. She did not expect Ziling to be so tolerant. She really trusted her wholeheartedly. Her willpower was so strong that she was ashamed of her inferiority. "Don't get off the bed before your legs are healed, I will find a maid to take care of you." Yi Qing Luo narrowed her eyes and said faintly. Ziling's face immediately showed fear. "Miss, you can't do that. Now Miss has finally gotten the attention of old madam. If for Ling, old madam had always been the most concerned about etiquette. A maid lying on the bed, and still let a maid to take care of her. If this were to be passed to old madam, wouldn't Miss be punished? Do you think your Miss needs to look at old madam's face?" Yi Qing Luo shook her head and directly interrupted Ziling's words. "You just need to listen to my arrangements." Ziling's lips slightly pursed, obviously still worried that because of her relationship, her Miss would be implicated. "Do you still want to follow in my footsteps? Do you still want to train hard after your legs are healed and accompany me to the Heavenly Academy?" "Yes." "Then be obedient." Yi Qing Luo looked at Ziling's teary eyes and couldn't help but rub her head again. If Ziling were to dress up properly and gain some weight, she would definitely be a great beauty in the Lolita category. The current Yi family would grant Yi Qing Luo's every request. Even if old Grand Madam had some words against Yi Qing Luo because of her rudeness. But now, who would dare to offend this increasingly dazzling seventh young mistress? This was the last woman in the Yi clan who could bring honor to the Yi clan. Even if the elder ancestor was angry, he had to endure it. Of course, there was another important point. Because of Madame Yuchi's rudeness towards Yi Qing Luo, old Grand Madam had already stripped away Madame Yuchi's authority and handed it over to third concubine, who was also Madame Baiming. This Baiming clan was the concubine daughter of a great clan from another continent. Speaking of which, he and Baiming Lianqing from the devil class had a little bit of kinship. Yi Tianquang had once fallen in love with Lady Baiming at first sight when he was working in another continent. He immediately married her and brought her back to the Yi family, becoming the Yi family's third concubine. It had been a few months of sweetness and sweetness. Until both Madame Yuchi and Lady Baiming became pregnant one after another. Yi Tianquang was originally a person who was unwilling to be left out, so he had another 4 wives. This was a story for another time. But, in her impression, this Lady Baiming only had one son. She was also the most peaceful one in the backyard. Chapter 733. But Yi Qing Luo thought that this Baiming clan was the smartest woman in the backyard. She didn't fight or snatch, but could give birth to a son and raise him. What the backyard saw the most was the battle between Madame Yuchi and the 4th branch. On the contrary, Baiming clan was so quiet that people had completely forgotten her existence. If it wasn't for her son, who was in charge of all the expenses of Three Springs sect, the entire Yi family would have treated her as if she didn't exist. That's right. Baiming clan's son was the Yi family's housekeeper, the second young master Yi Fengru. Now that Madame Yuchi had fallen and Baiming clan had taken over, it had deeply confirmed Yi Qing Luo's guess. Not to mention the collapse of the 2nd branch, the 3rd branch would naturally take over. That woman from the 4th branch, who could fight with Madame Yuchi for so many years, was definitely not a good person. But she had fallen into the hands of the 2nd branch, Baiming clan. Baiming clan was definitely the smartest woman. Just like now, she knew how to see the situation clearly and draw Yi Qing Luo to her side. Hearing that Yi Qing Luo wanted a well-behaved and smart maid to take care of Ziling who had caught a cold, she quickly sent her daughter over. Yi Qing Luo had seen this maid before. She was indeed a smart maid, named Hong Mei, extremely well-behaved. When taking care of Ziling, she would never ask or say a word to others. In this Three Springs sect, which was filled with Madame Yuchi and old Madame spies, she was able to obtain this peace. Yi Qing Luo remembered this favor in her heart. That night, Yi Qing Luo went to the ancestral hall alone. This news quickly reached old Madame's ears. Old Madame rushed to the ancestral hall with the help of Baiming clan. Hearing this news, it would be a lie if old Madame said she wasn't angry. It had only been a day since she came back and Yi Qing Luo had relied on her current power to be arrogant again and again, not even putting her, old Madame, in her eyes. She was the dignified old Madame of Three Springs sect, when had she been so despised by a junior? Since Yi Qing Luo came back, she tried every means to persuade her and even brought it out of the ancestral hall to let Yi Qing Luo see that slut to please her. Yi Qing Luo pretended not to hear. But at this time, she came to the ancestral hall alone. Wasn't this a slap to her face? She kindly invited Yi Qing Luo to have a meal with her, but Yi Qing Luo totally ignored her. In the evening, she shamelessly asked to see her again, but was told that she was taking care of a maid who had caught a cold, so she wouldn't be accompanying her. Even Yi Fengyu had rejected her. The old ancestor was completely enraged. His heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys were so angry that they were about to be displaced. Yi Qing Luo had never treated her as an elder, or as a grandmother. She couldn't even compare to a maidservant. Taking care of a servant girl and refusing to accompany her own grandmother. Only Yi Qing Luo could use such a matter-of-fact tone to reject her. Right now, old Grand Madame had apparently forgotten that she herself had never treated Yi Qing Luo as her own granddaughter. At this moment, Yi Qing Luo was kneeling on the praying mat in the ancestral hall, her gaze staring deeply at the hundreds of memorial tablets on the shelf. Her mother's memorial tablet was placed in the leftmost corner. The two racks were arranged from top to bottom. But at the very bottom, on the far left, the arrangement of the tables was obviously not as neat as the top. Obviously, it had been tampered with. Her mother's memorial tablet was probably placed here temporarily by the old Grand Madame to take the opportunity to please her. Yi Qing Luo snorted lightly. She really didn't understand. Her mother, as the legal wife of Yi Tianquang, was also included in the Yi family's genealogy. From the moment she married into the Yi family, she had followed Yi Tianquang wholeheartedly and gave birth to a son and a daughter for him. Until her death, she had never complained about Yi Tianquang. Chapter 734. Yi Qing Luo stood up and straightened her mother's tablet, placing it properly. Following that, she knelt back onto the praying mat. The entire ancestral hall was in silence. The huge incense burner was filled with densely packed burning incense as the smoke curled upwards, making the ancestral hall even more sinister. The candlelight swayed, elongating Yi Qing Luo's shadow. But it also softened the contour lines on Yi Qing Luo's face. Her pair of charming eyes were filled with traces of gentleness. Mother. A soft sigh spilled out from her lips. In her heart, there were many questions and many words that she wanted to say to her mother. But now that she was here, she couldn't say anything, and wasn't willing to say anything. Yi Qing Luo believed that there was a soul in this world. Otherwise she wouldn't be here. Since her mother had already passed away for so long, why should she let her mother worry for her even in the afterlife? Mother, I will take good care of little Yu. When little Yu really grows up, I will let him become the next sovereign. Yi Qing Luo muttered softly. This was something that she had planned right from the start. She had no interest in the position of Three Springs Sect's sovereign. After all, she still had her own group of brothers and she still needed to lead the world group to roam the entire Nirvana realm. She couldn't possibly bind herself to Three Springs sect, to the West Continent. Just at this moment, Yiqing Luo's ears twitched as she heard a burst of mixed footsteps outside the ancestral hall. They came really quickly. Looked like old Grand Madam was really angered by her. Look at these footsteps, it was filled with energy. Before Yiqing Luo could stand up, the ancestral hall's door was pushed open fiercely as old Grand Madam's hoarse roar rang behind her. Old Seven. Who allowed you to come to the ancestral hall alone? Yiqing Luo slowly stood up and gently patted the creases on her clothes before turning her head around. Old Grand Madam had already walked into the ancestral hall and that aged face was filled with anger. His sinister long eyes seemed as though it was dipped in poison as he stared fiercely at her. This was the first time Yiqing Luo saw such obvious disgust on old Grand Madam's face. She had crossed old Grand Madam's bottom line this time round. Outside the ancestral hall, Yiqing Luo saw the Baiming clan in her memories. She had a gentle appearance and belonged to the obedient type. She was dressed in a plain blue matriarch robe, and her temperament was like that of a white lotus. Even though she was the mother of a son, she still looked like a woman in her 20s. This kind of white lotus temperament was absolutely different from Madame Yuqi and Yiqing Qian's white lotus lady temperament. The white lotus of the Baiming clan was a true white lotus. It was the kind of feeling that came out of the mud but was not tainted, the feeling of being clean but not bewitching. At this moment, Bei Mingshir's pair of lukewarm beautiful eyes were looking at Yiqing Luo worriedly. Behind her, there were 4 rough old maids. Yiqing Luo wasn't the slightest bit afraid of this dance. On the contrary, she revealed an enchanting smile. Didn't old madam say that I can come to the ancestral hall to meet my mother? Yiqing Luo spoke extremely slowly, as though there was nothing wrong with her way of doing things. The elder master was so angry that his entire body was trembling. Yes, she had indeed intentionally used the excuse of letting Yiqing Luo meet that slut in the ancestral hall, to please Yiqing Luo. But it didn't mean that Yiqing Luo could come to the ancestral hall alone. Moreover, Yiqing Luo didn't express her stance at that time. It was obvious that she had rejected, wasn't it? Now she came to the ancestral hall alone and was still so daring. Did she really think that there was no one else in the Yi family? The more old Grand Madam thought, the more she felt that she was being despised by a junior. Chapter 735. These words sounded like a granddaughter's grumbling to her grandmother. But listening carefully, one could hear the thick sarcasm in Yiqing Luo's words. What was said casually? What was meant by coaxing her to be happy? Wasn't this implying that her Yi family's old madam was full of lies, deceiving the younger generation? But unfortunately, old madam couldn't say a single word of rebuttal. Yiqing Luo gazed deeply at her mother's tablet, her voice was cold. I'm glad that I came to the ancestral hall today. The main door of the ancestral hall was opened and the wind blew into the ancestral hall. The candlelight swayed even more violently. Pulling Yiqing Luo's figure, it kept on shaking. It made half of her side face, as hazy as a ghost. In this ancestral hall, it looked extremely gloomy. Old Madam frowned, as her skinny fingers gripped the walking stick tightly. The old man's heavy breathing was extremely clear in the silent ancestral hall. Old Madam suppressed the surging panic in her heart. This was the Yi family's ancestral hall, all the ancestors of the Yi family. Even if the first madam really appeared, she would absolutely not do anything to her. If she wanted to find someone, it would be Yiqing Luo, that slut. Thinking of this, old madam's heart calmed down. If old madam doesn't treat my mother as a Yi family member, then pass my mother's ashes and tablet to me. I'm willing to worship my mother personally. As Yiqing Luo said, her gaze had shifted from the tablet back to old madam. That pair of long and narrow eyes, under the backlight of the candlelight, seemed to be burning with 2 balls of flames. There was no enchanting look in the past. There was only a piercingly cold gaze. Presumptuous. Old Madam couldn't hold back the anger in her heart, as she shouted sternly, "When did the Yi family treat you and your mother badly? When did the Yi family not treat you as a Yi family member? The Yi family had painstakingly raised you, yet you dare to say such treacherous words in front of your ancestors." Old Madam seemed to be very angry, as she raised her hand and landed it on Yi Qing Luo's face. "It's my dereliction of duty that I didn't personally teach you the Yi family's rules. Now in front of the ancestors, I'll teach you how to respect the elders properly." When the slap landed, the great ancestor's voice had already turned into one of gnashing teeth. His gloomy eyes were also filled with intense disgust. "Ancestor! No!" Lady Baiming stood at the door, anxious. As a concubine, she did not have the right to enter the ancestral hall. However, how could the great ancestor listen to Baiming clan's pleas at this moment? Yi Qing Luo naturally saw through Old Madam's emotions. How could he not see the profound qi lingering in the palm of the old ancestor? His words were accusing her of not knowing the rules. The truth was that he was infuriated by her and wanted to use this opportunity to teach her a lesson. If this slap really landed on her face, the teeth in her mouth would probably fly out. What's more, she would have to spend the next half a month in bed. What a ruthless ancestor! He was so ruthless to his own granddaughter, and he still had the nerve to say that he didn't treat them as outsiders. "I'm so sorry." She would not believe a single word that the elder ancestor said. When Old Madam's slap landed, Yi Qing Luo's body was like lightning, as she speedily retreated a few steps. Her heel pressed against the fruit and incense burner on the table. Old Madam's slap indeed used up all the strength in her body. But the slap landed on empty air. Because of inertia, how could the old man stand firmly? His body bent forward, and his whole body leaned forward. "Old Madam." Lady Baiming was so scared that her face turned pale. At this moment, she couldn't be bothered about whether she had the right to enter the ancestral hall, as her figure flashed and speedily rushed into the ancestral hall, barely catching Old Madam. Chapter 736. On the contrary, Yi Qing Luo stood calmly by the side of the table, looking at the both of them expressionlessly. Old Grand Madam's old face turned pale as her body trembled. Since when had she suffered such humiliation? A junior actually made her lose all her face. If she really fell to the ground because she had hit Yi Qing Luo's palm, her Yi family's old Grand Madam's face would be completely ruined. Vile spawn! Vile spawn! After Old Grand Madam regained her senses, she pointed at Yi Qing Luo and berated her. Baiming Shi supported Old Grand Madam and comforted her gently. "Old Grand Madam, don't be angry, don't harm your health. Seventh Miss is after all still a child." She was upset because she saw Madame Ye's memorial tablet. "Please don't be calculative with 7th Mississippi," her voice was extremely gentle and could calm one's heart. Saying that, Baiming Shi shot a sideways glance at Yi Qing Luo, hinting her not to be angry with Old Grand Madam. Towards this Baiming Shi, Yi Qing Luo was still unable to see through her. It seemed that this was the only lady in Three Springs sect who wholeheartedly thought for the Yi family. Baiming Shi's concern towards Old Grand Madam didn't seem fake. Baiming Shi helped her to explain for the matter earlier and calmed her temper, which seemed to be sincere. If all these were just acting, Yi Qing Luo had to admire Baiming Shi's superb acting skills. Now that she owed Baiming Shi a favor, she naturally wouldn't reject her face. She immediately kept her arrogance. "Today I didn't think it through and entered the ancestral hall without permission. But I still hope Old Grand Madam will consider my suggestion earlier." Saying that, she turned around and left the ancestral hall. This was considered as giving them a way out. Under Baiming Shi's gentle soothing words, Old Grand Madam's expression finally calmed down. Old Grand Madam, look, 7th Miss has been thinking about her mother's memorial tablet, aren't you trying to please her? Why not let this memorial tablet be worshipped to 7th Mississippi? In this way, 7th Miss will be happy and will be grateful to you, isn't it? Old Grand Madam's expression sunk when she heard Bai Ming Clan saying that she wanted to please Yi Qing Luo in front of everyone. But looking at the serious look on Lady Bai Ming's face, it was clear that she was sincerely trying to help him out. He could only suppress his anger. We'll talk about this later. Help me to the study. I'll write a letter to Wild Heaven. After Yi Qing Luo came out of the ancestral hall, she went to Ziling to check on the situation. After taking the bone healing pill and going through Yi Qing Luo's unique acupuncture technique, Ziling clearly felt that her legs were gradually recovering. Because the leg that had been crippled for 10 years had actually regained feeling. Even if it was painful and itchy, as if ants were devouring her bones, Ziling was still ecstatic. As long as she could feel it, it meant that her originally crippled leg could be saved. Hong Mei was by his side, holding a bowl of boiled medicinal soup. Hong Mei would not neglect Ziling just because she was a maidservant. Hong Mei had brewed this bowl of medicine according to Yi Qing Luo's instructions, without a single mistake. Yi Qing Luo was reassured as she instructed Ziling and passed tomorrow's dosage to Hong Mei before leaving Ziling's room. Tomorrow, she still had to meet up with the World Group's youngsters. Then she would return to Three Springs Sect to perform acupuncture on Ziling tonight. Yi Qing Luo returned to the bedroom, and before she could walk to the bedside, an arm suddenly wrapped around her waist from behind. Following that, a sandalwood scent assaulted her nostrils. Why are you here? Yi Qing Luo wasn't shocked as her body softly snuggled into his arms the moment the man wrapped around her. Dmo Xian rubbed against her neck as his warm breath sprayed onto her skin. Chapter 737. You asked Feng to investigate the Bai Ming clan. How could I not come? Dmo Xian couldn't help but plant a kiss on her neck as his long arms suddenly exerted strength, turning the woman's soft body to face him. Yi Qing Luo pursed her pink lips and scoffed lightly. That brat of Feng, he informed you of everything. Does he have to tell you even if I go to the toilet a few times? Dmo Xian's glimmering peach blossom eyes curved into a demonic charm. When I'm not around, I want to know everything about you. Then, he lowered his head and whispered into her ear, as for how many times you went to the toilet, I hope you can, tell me yourself. You, holy shit. Die. Change. Pervert. She admitted defeat. Dmo Xian's gaze became even more indulgent as he looked at the angry face of the woman he loved. He held Yi Qing Luo's little hand tightly and pressed it into his embrace as he gave a low laugh. The North Ming family's people are all very intelligent. Compared to power and influence, they would prefer a peaceful life. You're here just to tell me the results of your investigation personally. Yi Qing Luo raised her brows as her chin rested on his chest and looked up at him. Dmo Xian's dark eyes were deep and serene as he gazed deeply into her eyes, finally falling onto her tender lips. After meeting his gaze, Yi Qing Luo seemed to have realized something as her cheeks flushed red. She hammered his chest with her fist and buried her head in his arms. What are you looking at? Look at you. His clear and bright voice was as mellow as fine wine, intoxicating her heart. His gaze was extremely serious. As though he wanted to trap Yi Qing Luo into his own flesh and blood. At this moment, it was not only his cheeks that were burning hot. Even her body was burning like a raging fire. Little Luo, Dmo Xian's gaze was gentle and his voice was extremely low. He gently propped up Yi Qing Luo's little face as his eyes congealed on her blushing face. Such a lil Luoer was even more tempting. Yi Qing Luo's little heart was thumping wildly. She could clearly see the seriousness in the man's eyes. She could clearly see the flames in his eyes. Yi Qing Luo's fair little hands caressed his cheeks. This was a face she was familiar with. It was not the fake face of Supreme Imo. Her hands cupped Dmo Xian's face as she tiptoed and kissed his lips. How could Dmo Xian miss the initiative of his beloved woman? His slender fingers clasped the back of her head, and the arm around her waist tightened, deepening the kiss. His kiss was forceful and domineering. Yiqing Luo merely took some time before she sank into oblivion and went limp in his arms. Dmo Xian only released her swollen lips when both of them were panting heavily, as he closed his eyes in satisfaction. Yiqing Luo's face and ears were flush red as she laid on his chest panting heavily when she heard the man's husky magnetic voice resounding by the side of her ear. Lil Luo, being so proactive, is it because of the excitement from the academy? Which made you feel guilty towards me? Yiqing Luo raised her eyes and stared at him angrily as she raised her fist and hammered down heavily. Dmo Xian held her fist and placed it on his chest as he laughed heartily. His chest kept on moving up and down, and that strong and powerful heartbeat from her palm made Yiqing Luo's palm gradually turn hot. Yiqing Luo was extremely embarrassed. Vile man. Her skills were indeed too shallow. Every time she was in front of this man, she was the only one whose face was flushed red. On what basis did she have to be teased by him till she had no words to refute? She was obviously the real veteran. Yiqing Luo opened her mouth as she harshly bit on his shoulder. Chapter 738. The bronze mirror on the table in front coincidentally reflected Yiqing Luo's current expression. Dmo Xian glanced sideways and could see the lady's flushed cheeks and angry eyes from the bronze mirror. Extremely cute. She was so adorable that ripples appeared in his heart. In this world, only he could enjoy Yiqing Luo's cuteness alone. The warmth in Dmo Xian's peach blossom eyes became more intense. He held the woman in his arms tightly, unable to restrain himself. He lifted her chin, wanting to ask for another deep kiss, but was pushed away by the lady shyly. Yiqing Luo was like a cat as she jumped onto the bed and pulled down the veil. Tomorrow I still have to go to the Mercenary Association to take on the mission. I need to rest early. I won't send you off. Unbeknownst to him, the lady's delicate figure was faintly discernible in the white veil. This was a challenge to Dmo Xian's self-control. Dmo Xian's black eyes were like a whirlpool, lingering in the bottom of his eyes. His body gradually moved closer to the bed. Yiqing Luo's body tensed up. Either you return to the academy or the mansion. She had never experienced love affairs before, but she knew what the flame in Dmo Xian's eyes meant. Although she was a new generation woman in the 21st century, it didn't mean that she could let Dmo Xian have sex before she got married. Dmo Xian seemed as though he didn't hear anything as he walked to the bed and lifted the veil. His narrow peach blossom eyes smiled at the stiff lady on the bed. It's not the first time we share a bed. Lil Luo should be used to it. During those days in the academy, Dmo Xian would sneak into her bedroom every night and hug her to sleep. Indeed, it wasn't the first time. But the situation now was obviously different. This was the Three Springs sect, not the academy. If Dmo Xian didn't control himself, wouldn't she be a sheep walking into the wolf's mouth? Lil Luo is afraid of me. Dmo Xian's knees were already kneeling on the bed as he leaned forward. That peerless handsome face was magnified in Yiqing Luo's eyes. Yiqing Luo's breathing suddenly stopped as her heart seemed to jump to her throat. I'm afraid of you, Before she could finish her words, in the next second, her body felt light as she and Dmo Xian both fell onto the bed. Dmo Xian's long arm hooked around her slender waist, pulling her into his embrace as one long slender leg laid across Yiqing Luo. The man's scorching temperature and those hard muscles made Yiqing Luo's body tense up. Dmo Xian's large palm covered her head, her soft hair rubbing against his palm. He chuckled and hugged her body tightly. Silly girl, go to sleep. Yiqing Luo's eyes widened. Sleep. Dmo Xian asked her to sleep. Didn't he want to? If you still don't close your eyes, I will really start to act according to the image in your mind. Dmo Xian's low and hoarse voice sounded even more magnetic. Yiqing Luo's face was as red as a tomato. She opened her mouth and fiercely bit down on Dmo Xian's shoulder, spurning this vile man, full of filth. Yiqing Luo did not bite lightly. Dmo Xian's brows didn't even crease. Stop fooling around, I have to make a trip back to the Imperial Palace tomorrow. I might not be able to accompany you for the next 3 days of holiday. A low and hoarse magnetic man's voice was filled with pampering as it lingered by the side of her ear, like a feather that tickled one's heart. Yiqing Luo was stunned as she loosened her bite and raised her head to look at him. Go to the Imperial Palace. Something happened in the Imperial Palace, I'll be back 3 days later. Dmo Xian rubbed her head. Yiqing Luo's original excited mood suddenly dissipated. She buried her head into Dmo Xian's embrace. Is it something serious? Chapter 739. Yiqing Luo responded gloomily. She couldn't hide the disappointment in her heart. Suddenly, she recalled that when she first met Dmo Xian, he had left the sublime profound heart jade in her body due to urgent matters in the Imperial Palace and left Win to guard her side before he left in a hurry. In fact, during that period in the academy, Yiqing Luo had seen Dmo Xian receiving secret letters from the Imperial Palace several times. Every time, Dmo Xian's peerless face would be covered with a layer of haze. She had always thought that Dmo Xian would accompany her, unconditionally satisfying all her requests, unconditionally treating the brothers whom she cared about as his own people. Which made her almost forget about it. This man was not only her man. And it was the Supreme Dizun. Nirvana Realm's first palace, the Imperial Palace Lord. The higher one's ability was, the greater the responsibility. It's really just a few small matters. After we meet in the academy, I'll strip naked for you to check, all right? Sensing the disappointment in the woman's tone, Dmo Xian hugged her tightly, trying to lighten the atmosphere. Yiqing Luo didn't act like usual, punching him when she heard his dirty teasing. She still buried her head in his chest, biting her pink lips. Dmo Xian sighed softly as he lifted the woman's petite body and shifted upwards, exchanging glances with her. His slender fingers caressed Yiqing Luo's pink lips, gently caressing, "If you can't bear to leave me, I won't go." The woman's fair little hand suddenly stretched out, holding the big hand on her lips. "It's not that I don't want you to go." Yiqing Luo lowered her eyes, her curly long lashes were thick, but it was unable to conceal the disappointment in her eyes. She automatically circled his neck. "I just feel that no matter what happens to me, you will accompany me and give me help. But I am unable to accompany you, to give you any help." Her ability was not enough. Far from enough. If she was a little stronger, she would have enough qualifications to stand beside Dmo Xian. No matter what happened in the Imperial Palace, she would be able to stand beside Dmo Xian, to help him solve his problems. Instead of waiting foolishly for Dmo Xian to return. In this case, it was so sweet and warm that Dmo Xian's heart almost melted. "You being by my side now is the greatest help to me." Dmo Xian couldn't help himself as he lifted Yiqing Luo's chin and kissed her all over her face. Yiqing Luo's petite body trembled as she gradually softened her body, accepting his kiss. He murmured, "But I want the people around you to truly acknowledge me." Her brother had completely acknowledged Dmo Xian's existence. But on Dmo Xian's side, even if it was on account of Dmo Xian's face, they would not show any resistance towards her. But in their hearts, they would never submit to her. Dmo Xian was too outstanding. It could be said that Dmo Xian was a myth and legend in too many people's hearts. Dmo Xian was the god they revered. There was no woman in this world who was qualified to stand beside Dmo Xian. If she wanted to be with Dmo Xian, she must possess the same level of strength as him. What she wanted was the imperial palace's people, Dmo Xian's people, to genuinely acknowledge her, to be able to stand beside Dmo Xian. The woman I fancy, will definitely be peerless and unparalleled. Dmo Xian kissed between her brows, as the depth of his eyes was as deep as the abyss. His gaze turned gentler and gentler, as though his entire face was soaked in honey, so sweet that it was sickeningly sweet. This was his Lil Luo, the woman he fancied. It was because he knew Yi Qing Luo's character that until now, he still hadn't brought her to the imperial palace. Chapter 740. The next day, when Yi Qing Luo woke up, Dmo Xian was no longer by her side. She sighed softly, her expression becoming firm and dignified. Her now, not only was it for herself to become stronger, she was also fighting for Dmo Xian. She wanted to use the fastest speed to reach the peak. Yi Qing Luo clenched her fists as she got up from the bed and speedily washed up. Before leaving, Yi Qing Luo went to check on Ziling's condition. After ascertaining that there weren't any other influences, Yi Qing Luo left the courtyard and headed straight towards the huge mansion which the youngsters from the World Group had agreed on. Yi Qing Luo didn't know that not too long after she left, old Grand Madam came to Yi Qing Luo's courtyard with the support of Baiming clan. In Bei Mingshi's hands, there was still Yi Qing Luo's mother's name engraved on the ranking. After leaving the ancestral hall yesterday, under the comforting words of the Baiming clan, the great ancestor had regained his senses. Today he borrowed Yi Qing Luo's request yesterday to take that slut's tablet and send it to her courtyard. Who knew that when they arrived at the courtyard, they were informed by Hong Mei that Yi Qing Luo had left Three Springs sect early in the morning. The elder ancestor's face turned as black as charcoal on the spot, his face ashen. However, he had already taken the tablet, so there was no reason for him to return it. Lady Baiming gave the tablet to Hong Mei, then helped the old ancestor leave. After Yi Qing Luo stepped into the mansion, she immediately felt that she had walked into the wrong place. The exterior of the old house was still nostalgic and ancient. But, she remembered that the interior design of the old house was very simple and elegant, without losing its grandeur. Why had it become like this now? Why did it look like the old house of a nouveau riche? Who could tell her what the hell was going on? The huge garden was no longer filled with flowers, and the lush trees were also gone. Instead, there was a fake mountain made of gold and a pond with clear water flowing around it. On both sides of the pond, there were two golden lion sculptures. The lion's eyes were inlaid with luminous pearls and looked especially dazzling. Yi Qing Luo was completely dumbfounded. She was not the only one who was confused. The dozen or so youths who had arrived earlier were also dumbfounded. After they entered the old house, they began to wonder if they had come to the wrong place. But, even if they went to the wrong place, it was impossible for more than 10 people to go to the wrong place at the same time. Go. Let's go in and take a look. Yi Qing Luo frowned. This kind of decor and design was completely unlike Yan Xiaoyi's style. Moreover, it was impossible to build the fake mountain, pond, and two golden lions in a short period of time. Yan Xiaoyi, who had been staying with them in the academy for the past month, did not have the time to make such a large construction. This old residence was purchased by Yan Xiaoyi. After becoming the World Group's gathering place, it was even more impossible for Yan Xiaoyi to sell this old mansion. There was only one possibility: this old house had been forcibly taken away. Was it the Yuqi family who deliberately invaded their territory when they were in the Heavenly Academy? When they crossed the garden and arrived at the courtyard where they were training, they were even more dumbfounded. The ground of the huge courtyard had been rebuilt. It was exactly like the floor of a training ground. Around the courtyard, there were 10 weapon racks, with all kinds of weapons placed on them. In the middle of the training ground, there were a total of 20 over men dressed in the World Group uniform currently training. Seeing someone coming over, those men stopped their training and turned their heads in unison. Yiqing Luo was rather familiar with these faces. Chapter 741. 10 over youngsters also recognized them as their eyes opened wide, as though they couldn't believe that they would actually appear here. If it wasn't for the fact that they were wearing their own uniform, they would have thought that their mansion had been forcefully occupied by the Blue Dragon mercenary group. Yiqing Luo's expression was extremely indifferent, as though she had long expected that they would come over. She only used a sharp gaze to sweep past those 20 over men, as though she was confirming their numbers. The leader of the group, Xiao Bo, took a step forward as he looked respectfully at Yiqing Luo. "Miss Yi, we have a total of 24 brothers and we're here to seek shelter from the World Mercenary Group. We hope that Miss Yi will take us in." His tone was neither servile nor overbearing. He didn't seem to feel that it was embarrassing to lower their heads to this young lady who was just a 15-year-old young lady. They only believed in those who had the ability. Yiqing Luo had enough qualifications to make them believe in her. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into a smile as she slowly nodded. "Welcome to your edition. Congratulations on making the best choice." Xiao Bo's expression was neither happy nor angry as he cupped his fists. "I hope so." Seeking shelter from the World Group was their current only choice. Of course, it was also because the mercenary group allowed them to see hope. It allowed them to see the dream of joining the mercenary group back then. The World Group's unity, their tacit understanding, and that kind of brotherhood which disregarded everything for their brothers, had infected them. Since Xiao Bo had brought his brothers over, naturally he hoped that this would be the last mercenary group they would stay in, an eternal mercenary group. Yiqing Luo smiled as her gaze surveyed the surroundings of the training grounds as her brows rose. "This place is yours." "No." Xiao Bo shook his head. "It was built by Thief Butler. He said that you instructed him before you left." Thief Butler? What the hell? When did she instruct him to do these things? Her taste in beauty wasn't so deranged to such a stage. Wait a minute. Thief. Yiqing Luo's brows twitched as her lips twitched a few times as her eyes turned extremely vicious. Her pink lips moved, and every single cold word came out of her mouth. Thief. Saint, come out right now. Not long after, an old man dressed in silk and brocade leisurely walked out from the inner courtyard. TSK, little girl, this old man is not deaf. There is no need to shout so loudly. After seeing God Thief's dressing clearly, Yiqing Luo almost spat out a mouthful of blood. The navy blue robe was embroidered with large gold ingots. That's right. Just one. Two. There were also 3 jadeite stones of different colors hanging on his waist. Her messy hair was casually tied into a bun. He wore a purple gold jade crown, which was also inlaid with a few shining agate stones. This was the typical attire of a nouveau riche. Damn it. So, this was holy pirate style. Pft. This was the first time the dozen or so youths behind him had seen someone dressed like this. They couldn't help but burst into laughter. Yiqing Luo's lips twitched as she resisted the urge to give God Thief a good beating. Taking a deep breath, she turned her head and looked at the 10 over youngsters behind her. You guys stay here for your morning exercise first, I'll have a private chat with God Thief. The last 4 words were said through clenched teeth. Following that, she walked towards God Thief in big strides. Stretching out her hand, she grabbed God Thief's skinny shoulder and dragged him into the inner courtyard without any explanation. From afar, she could still hear God Thief's loud and clear voice. The 10 over youngsters who remained in the courtyard rubbed their arms. Do you feel that? Boss's gaze is very scary. Chapter 742. A young lady's uncontrollable howl was heard coming from the inner courtyard's main hall. Stinky old man. When I returned to the academy, didn't you pat your chest and promise me that you would help me take care of the old mansion while I'm not around? Yiqing Luo's hands pressed down on God Thief's shoulders as she forcefully pressed him onto the chair. Her exquisite face was filled with anger. God Thief put on an innocent look. Haven't I been taking good care of your old mansion? Take good my ass. Yiqing Luo tugged his lapel as she rubbed his messy hair as those few resplendent agate stones kept on shaking. What kind of clothes are you wearing? Are you afraid that others don't know that you like gold ingots? And this hairpin, this jade pendant. And who allowed you to change the garden into that look? Who allowed you to touch this courtyard? And this main hall of mine, what kind of look did you call it? Without a doubt, the entire old mansion's decorations had not escaped from God Thief's evil hands. Take a look at this main hall. The pillars had already been painted with a layer of gold lacquer. All the mahogany and whitewood tables and chairs had been changed into golden shiny furniture. The tea set on top of every golden table was also made of gold. Had it fallen into the gold vault? God Thief pushed Yiqing Luo's hand away as he retorted in a serious manner, I've spent so many gold coins for your own good. Look at how noble and majestic this mansion of ours looks. Noble your head. Majestic your head. Yiqing Luo really wanted to throw up blood. As the World Group's butler, I represent the World Group's image, so naturally I have to dress up properly. Don't you feel that my dressing up in this way makes the World Group look high-end and not lacking in money? Yiqing Luo only felt that. This made the World Group look like a silly group. At least that was what she felt. Of course the garden needs to be decorated with a golden mountain and set up a pond. This is an auspicious sign. Young lady, I'm telling you, don't doubt the elderly's words. If you don't listen to the elderly's words, you'll be at a disadvantage right in front of you, I'm telling you. If the guests came to the World Group's gathering place and saw those wild flowers and weeds in the garden, wouldn't it lower your status? Towards God Thief's serious look of nonsense, Yiqing Luo was completely speechless. As for that courtyard of yours, since it's for the mercenaries to train, it should be more professional. It will also be of great help to the future development of mercenaries. The hall is even more important. The hall represents the owner's aesthetics of grandeur, as well as wealth, etc. I'm doing this for the World Group. Yiqing Luo really wanted to stuff God Thief's mouth. After calming herself down, Yiqing Luo's lips curled into a fake smile. So, where did your gold coins come from? Holy Pirate had been locked up in Death God Castle for 10 years and had only been out for a month. How could he have so many coins? One had to know that it would cost at least tens of thousands of gold coins to remodel the garden, the training ground, and all the facilities in the old house. It was enough to buy an entire city. Did you hide money in the past? God Thief met with Yiqing Luo's interrogative gaze as he delightfully raised his chin. Don't forget my identity. Holy Thief. He was famous for stealing in the Nirvana realm. As long as he, Holy Thief, took action, there was nothing that he couldn't steal. 10 years ago, he was also known as Nirvana Realm's Legend and Legend. Which family did you steal from? Steal. To be able to steal so many gold coins. Holy Thief rubbed his nose. I made a trip to the Yuchi family's warehouse and conveniently made a trip to the palace. Yuchi family. Palace. Alright, there could be that. Chapter 743. Last month, the World Group's youngsters had tasted the wonderful taste of training. This time round's training, all of them were extremely enthusiastic. By the time Yi Qing Luo and God Thief came out from the main hall and returned to the courtyard. Now, it should be called as the training grounds. All the youngsters were dressed in the mercenary group's uniform and were having a one-on-one competition with Zhao Bo and the others. Where's the overlord? Seeing that Dmo Xian wasn't following behind Yi Qing Luo, Qiao Jin, who was standing outside the crowd, asked curiously. He has something to settle. Yi Qing Luo explained simply. Her vision went past the surrounding crowd and fell onto Baiming Lianqing and Zhao Bo, who were in the midst of a battle. They didn't use any profound qi and it was totally a physical fight. Apparently, Zhao Bo's skills were on a higher level. After all, Zhao Bo was an old mercenary and had completed no less than 500 missions. Baiming Lianqing was just a tender little newbie, so naturally he wasn't a match for Zhao Bo, who had been on the battlefield for a long time. This battle didn't last for too long. Baiming Lianqing was defeated. The surrounding students cheered and applauded as they started to ask Zhao Bo for advice on battle tactics. This was how the mercenary group got along. No discord, no concord. The more they fought, the deeper their relationship. But in just 1 hour, these two groups of people's relationship had already melded together. Just at this moment, an astonished cry was heard from outside the training grounds. Why has this place changed? Have I walked to the wrong place? It was Yi Fengyu's voice. In order to nurture Yi Fengyu's self-awareness, Yi Qing Luo especially didn't wait for him to meet up and reported to the old residents together. She had not expected him to arrive so late. Yi Qing Luo went up and was just about to reprimand Yi Fengyu when she saw two slender figures following beside Yi Fengyu. Brother Zifan, Brother Zifei, let me first confirm, I seem to have really walked to the wrong place. Sister. Yi Fengyu explained awkwardly, but when he saw Yi Qing Luo walking towards him, he heaved a sigh of relief. He took a look at the two people behind him and immediately walked towards Yi Qing Luo as he asked softly, Sister, what's going on here? Why has the garden changed so much? Yi Qing Luo walked past his tall figure and faintly saw the corner of the Mu brothers' clothes. Why are they here? Qing Luo. Mu Zifan was already walking towards her. He waved the folding fan in his hand, his eyes brimming with joy. Brother, you specifically came to the Pristine Elixir Medicine store to tell me that you've already agreed to the alchemist competition held by the Alchemy Guild. Yi Qing Luo nodded. I'm just a dabbler alchemist who is half a step into the alchemy profession, so I'm sure I'll be able to learn a lot during the alchemist competition. Getting Yi Qing Luo's exact answer, the expression on Mu Zifan's face became even more delighted. I heard from Brother Yu that you have established a mercenary group. If possible, let Zifei join your mercenary group. How about it? This is the world group's honor. Yi Qing Luo naturally wouldn't reject such a strong assistant. As for me, I'm afraid. Mu Zifan pursed his lips hesitantly. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled into an understanding smile. I understand. An ordinary alchemist from the Alchemy Union could join a mercenary group or an adventurer group as long as they had the permission of the union's leader. But Mu Zifan's identity was different. He was the Alchemy Union's young chief, and also the future Alchemy Union's chief. If he personally joined a certain powerhouse, it would be equivalent to the entire Alchemy Union joining that powerhouse. This kind of matter was something that the Alchemy Union and other powerhouses would absolutely not allow to happen. Chapter 744. Long Yun Zhan separated 25 mercenary group member badges from the group leader badges and distributed them to Mu Zifei, Zhao Bo, and the others. Seeing Mu Zifei change into the world group's uniform and wear the member badge, Mu Zifan nodded his head in gratification. The few of them exchanged a few more conventional greetings before Mu Zifan said that the Alchemist Guild still had urgent matters that required his attention. Thus, he left Mu Zifei in the world group and left. Seeing the youngsters surrounding Xiao Bo, Mu Zifei and the others, chattering non-stop, Yiqing Luo's eyes were filled with smiles. She raised her hand and shouted, "Brothers, are you ready? Let's go to the mercenary union now." The mercenaries replied excitedly, "Let's go." The group left the mansion in a grandiose manner, heading towards the direction of the mercenary union. The front was led by Qiao Jin and Yan Xiao Yi, while Yiqing Luo, Long Yun Zhan and Mo Yuing walked at the back of the group. Yiqing Luo walked beside Long Yun Zhan as her charming eyes carefully sized up those mercenaries who were still maintaining their excitement. Second group suggestion, what do you think? Long Yun Zhan glanced sideways slightly, as he expressionlessly looked at Yiqing Luo for a moment, as he spoke out calmly, "Xiao Bo and the rest have 11 people who are Celestial Phoenix Academy students. If they're arranged into the second group, that would mean that after deducting the holidays, there's only 13 people left in the group." 13 people, it was indeed too little. However, we can discuss this matter with Xiao Bo and the rest first. The world group will definitely gather reliable fresh blood in the future, and setting up a second group is not a bad choice. Long Yun Zhan saw that she was deep in thought and suggested another method. After all, the world group had only been established for a month. Even though they were promoted to a bronze plate mercenary group on the second day, they were still at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. Most importantly, their team was a little special, so they couldn't recruit new members as they pleased like other mercenary teams. After Xiao Bo has completely settled down in the world group, I will hand over the management of the second group to Xiao Bo. The recruitment of new members can also be handed over to him. Mo Yuing, who had been silent all this while, tilted her head and spoke with an extremely rigid tone and speed. Yiqing Luo's eyes lit up as she applauded, "This idea isn't bad. Handing over everything to them to manage also represents our trust in him." There were more than 90 people in this group. Although there were many people, their steps were neat and orderly, and they walked quite quickly. Not long after, the group passed by the marketplace. Standing in the middle of the marketplace, Qiao Jin and Yan Xiao Yi halted. Yiqing Luo's mood suddenly became heavier by quite a bit. The place that had been bathed in blood last month had already regained its original liveliness. All the merchants had been replaced. The merchants continued to sell, and the adventurers continued to buy. Nothing had changed. It was as if the bloodbath in the marketplace did not exist at all. However, the few of them knew very well that that cruel memory was deeply imprinted in their minds, and could never be erased. The tea house had been replaced by a newly built auction house. Opposite the tea house, there was no longer the stall owner who had painted the most beautiful scene in the world for them. No one mentioned the scene of the massacre, and no one cared about the innocent people who had died. A trace of loneliness and reluctance flashed across their eyes. Long Yun Zhan placed his hand on Yiqing Luo's shoulder from behind as his cold voice was filled with a strong sense of determination. "After we become stronger, we will take revenge for those innocent people who once existed here." He would definitely take revenge for this. Chapter 745. More than 90 people, all standing on the street of the marketplace, were naturally eye-catching. For some reason, there were many mercenary groups passing through the market early in the morning. A mercenary group consisted of dozens or hundreds of people. The incomparably spacious marketplace became much more crowded. Yiqing Luo and the others stopped in their tracks as they looked towards the direction of the tea house. Suddenly, he heard a cry of pain, and soon after, a man's rude voice could be heard, "Kid, are you blind? Do you know who we are? How dare you block the way here?" Soon after, a young man was pushed to the ground and fell on his butt. The man who pushed the young man laughed proudly. "A kid who doesn't even have the strength to truss a chicken is worthy of being a mercenary. I'm laughing my head off, ah ha ha." As he laughed, the group of followers behind him also laughed loudly. The youths bent down to help the young man up. Their expressions were extremely ugly. You guys were the ones who crashed into us. Anne. If I say it was you guys who hit it, then it was you guys. The man raised his voice and took a step forward with a ferocious look in his eyes. He reached out to push the young man who had just retorted. Little brat, you're still drinking milk at home when you haven't even grown your hair. Now that you've bumped into me, I'll break your legs if you don't have *King give me some money to pay the doctor. Hearing the man's vile words, the youths furrowed their brows. When they saw the outstretched hand, they quickly took a step back and looked at Long Yunjian. They remembered what Yiqing Luo had once said. Outside of the academy, they were not allowed to make any moves. They had to listen to the leader's arrangements. You actually dare to dodge. The man pushed the air and was immediately unable to restrain his anger. The muscles on his face kept trembling. With a wave of his arm, dozens of people dressed in the same uniform surrounded the world group. Today, if you brats don't kneel down and hand over the coins to me, none of you will be able to leave. Yiqing Luo half narrowed her eyes as she sized up these people. Judging from their attire, temperament, and tone, they should be a small mercenary group that specialized in doing despicable things. He didn't know what day it was today. Why were there so many mercenary groups gathered at the market? Even such a mercenary group was mixed in. They were trying to blackmail her. Yiqing Luo crossed her arms as she walked past those youngsters and slowly walked towards that man. When the youngsters saw Yiqing Luo appearing, they all opened up a path. When that man saw Yiqing Ho, his eyes immediately emitted a wolfish glint. You're the boss of this bunch of brats. Yiqing Luo's lips curled up slightly, her long and narrow eyes were flowing with ripples. The more the man looked, the more his heart itched. He couldn't wait to take this little girl home and cherish her. He rubbed his hands together, and the muscles on his face trembled. Little beauty, I don't want the money anymore. Come home with me. Saying that, he gave a sinister smile as he stretched out his hand towards Yiqing Luo. But the man's hand had just stretched out, and before he could even touch Yiqing Luo, the petite figure in front of him seemed to have disappeared into thin air. He touched nothing. The man was in disbelief as his hand started to flail about on the spot where Yiqing Luo had stood previously. There was nothing but air. His eyes widened, and just as he was about to burst into a rage and scold these little brats, a burning pain suddenly came from his entire face. Following that, he felt his nose turning sore as some liquid started to flow out. Immediately following that, pain was felt from his oral cavity. A sound was heard as a mouthful of blood started to gush out, along with several yellowed teeth. Chapter 746. The man scanned the surroundings with a fiendish look. His gaze, however, was fixed on the young girl beside him, who was looking at him with a smile. The young lady's long and narrow eyes, although enchanting, but on a closer look, it revealed a frosty coldness. Her smile became more and more alluring, and the chilling feeling grew even stronger. See, don't you want to lose your teeth? I'll satisfy you, no need to thank me. Yiqing Luo's sweet voice was clear and pleasant to listen to. Following that, she took a step forward. An invisible majestic aura was released, causing those men's aura to be crushed into nothing. That arrogant man retreated a few steps. This scene, in the eyes of outsiders, was indeed a joke. A tall man with a height of 1.9 meters, with bulging muscles. A petite young lady who had just reached the man's chest, her looks were peerless and tender, with a young lady's sweet smile. But that young lady forced the 1.9 meters tall man to retreat step by step. Next, where is it? Yiqing Luo blinked her eyes in a daze, as she turned her head to look at those youngsters who were pushed away earlier. Legs! Legs! The youngsters were extremely cooperative. Yi-Ching Luo nodded her head in enlightenment. Right, break his legs. Saying that, she put on a sweet smile as she looked at the man. Then, what about his legs? The man's face turned pale. This young lass, whose hair hadn't even grown fully, dared to humiliate him in this way. How could the man not see the ridicule in the eyes of those people who were watching the show around them? Jiao Jiao was just a young lass, he could beat her into a meat patty with just one punch. How could he possibly have any fear towards this young lass? The man's pride and arrogance couldn't believe that he would be afraid of a young lass. He clenched his fists tightly, as his peripheral vision shot a glance at the bunch of brothers behind him. Go. Capture this wretched lass back alive for me. The few of us brothers haven't tasted meat for a long time. A young lady who was as pretty as a flower, one look and one knew that she was a virgin. Those vicious-looking men, when they heard that, their eyes started to emit a wolf's light. All of them were like wolves and tigers, as they pounced towards Yi-Ching Luo's direction. While the adventurers and stall owners were watching the show, a deafening roar suddenly came from afar. You dare to cause trouble in the marketplace? Capture all of them. As soon as he finished speaking, more than a dozen people wearing dark armor and holding silver spears charged over. When they saw those people, the onlookers acted as if they had rehearsed this beforehand. They swarmed away and pretended not to see anything. These were the guards of the marketplace. If they encountered unscrupulous merchants or adventurers, the guards had the right to throw them out of the market and terminate their right to enter the market. Because of this, the people in the marketplace were extremely respectful towards the guards. Behind the dozen guards, a middle-aged man in a dark robe slowly walked over. The man had a rat's head and a rat's brain. One look and you could tell that he was not a good person. He had his hands behind his back and was probably the leader of these guards. Lord Law Enforcer, Lord Law Enforcer. The fiendish man suddenly became as docile as a lamb, covering his mouth and nose. That leaky accent sounded extremely interesting. The man who was addressed as Lord Law Enforcer frowned, as he gave that man a disgusted look. Big Bear, get lost, don't discuss this, Lord Law Enforcer. Big Bear immediately retreated a few steps, as he bawled and complained, Lord Law Enforcer, you have to seek justice for me. I am a first-rate good citizen. This young lass led a bunch of kids here to cause trouble, I couldn't even persuade them, and was even beaten up. Yi-Ching Luo and the crowd. Chapter 747. The law enforcer squinted his sinister eyes as he coldly swept a glance at Yi-Ching Luo and the others. Capture them and bring them to the law enforcement dungeon. Very quickly, another group of armored guards rushed over. Without any explanation, they went up to capture them. The World Group's youngsters were infuriated. This man called Brother Xiong actually twisted the truth. Kitty Lee was originally ignorant of worldly affairs, so how could she stand others slandering her own brothers? Her petite figure suddenly dashed to the front of the crowd as her spirited beautiful eyes widened. He's spouting rubbish. It's obvious that he saw us as young, so he intentionally extorted our money. The surrounding people can all be witnesses. Kitty Lee pointed to those merchants and adventurers who had dispersed but had their ears pricked up as they paid close attention to this side. The minute they saw a youngster pointing at them, these merchants and adventurers immediately put on an unconcerned look. We don't know anything. What extortion? We didn't see anything. I'm just a passerby. After hanging around this street for a long time, everyone knew the way to survive. Meddling in other people's business would easily implicate them. Especially for this bunch of rogue mercenary groups who often hung around in the marketplace, doing all sorts of shady deals. If it wasn't for the fact that they had the support of the law enforcer, how could they be so arrogant? These people didn't want to implicate themselves for a bunch of kids whom they didn't even know. No matter if it was the merchants or adventurers, they all put on an unconcerned look. You all. Kitty Lee's face flushed red from anger. Father was right, humans were all not good things. Other than her sister and brothers. Kitty. Yiqing Luo patted Kitty Lee's shoulder lightly as she shook her head at her. You're a human, so don't try to reason with a dog. After all, humans and dogs speak different languages. Yiqing Luo's voice was sweet and melodious. His tone was serious, as if he was talking about a great principle of life. Who are you calling a dog? The man shouted furiously. Who should be talking about who? Yiqing Luo blinked her eyes as her smile was sweet and harmless. The law enforcer's expression sunk. Yiqing Luo had apparently scolded him as well. When Big Bear saw Lord Law Enforcer's unfriendly expression, he had nothing to fear with Lord Law Enforcer backing him up. Immediately, he raised his fist and with a vicious glint in his eyes, he threw a punch towards Yiqing Luo's direction. Wretched lass. I'll discipline you on behalf of your parents. You're just a cheap girl who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Yiqing Luo's wrist flipped and her fair little hand firmly clasped onto his incoming fist. That small hand was probably no bigger than half of the bear's fist. But only Big Xiong alone could clearly feel that powerful force. He didn't even have the strength to struggle free. Lord Enforcer. Big Bear's face contorted in pain. Yiqing Luo's 5 fingers tightened one by one. Big Bear could clearly hear the bones in his 5 fingers shattering. The pain of that bone shattering was so excruciating that he wished he was dead. Just as Brother Xiong was about to faint from the pain, Yiqing Luo released his hand. Big Bear's whole body went limp on the ground. He hugged his hand and rolled on the ground in pain. The law enforcer's expression was extremely gloomy as a chilly glint shot out from his eyes. The surrounding crowd sighed helplessly as they shook their heads. These young men and young ladies were indeed a bunch of young and arrogant ladies who didn't know the ways of the world, young masters. Lord Law Enforcer obviously wanted to protect Big Bear and the others, but these young men and young ladies didn't give him any face at all. Going against the Lord Law Enforcer. Chapter 748. Yo, isn't this student Yiqing Luo? A delicate voice was heard from the periphery of the crowd. Following that, Brother Xiong's bunch of brothers opened up a path. A gorgeous lady dressed in a jade green long dress, with several blossoming peonies embroidered on the cuffs, and golden silk embroidered a few pieces of auspicious clouds, slowly walked over. The golden eyelashes drew a long and narrow arc at the corner of her eyes, making that exquisite face look even more charming. 5th Miss Shangwan. Brother Xiong's bunch of brothers bowed respectfully towards the lady as they greeted. Even the law enforcer saw the lady, and his steely expression eased up a little. These people. 5th Miss Shangwan knows them. Shangwan Luli looked at Yiqing Luo arrogantly, as her eyes couldn't conceal the resentment. Acquaintances couldn't be more familiar. She intentionally emphasized on the last few words. Anyone would be able to hear the rage in his voice. The law enforcer shouted coldly, "You bunch of good-for-nothings, what are you still standing here for? Arrest all these people who are causing trouble in the marketplace for this law enforcer." Following that, he looked towards Shangwan Luli in a fawning manner. 5th Miss Shangwan, the marketplace has its own rules. These kids have violated the marketplace's rules, so by right or by reason, they must accept the marketplace's punishment. On the surface, he was praising Shangwan Luli's kindness, advising her not to plead for her friend. In actual fact, he was telling Shangwan Luli that these people had violated the rules. If Shangwan Luli had enmity with these people, she could go to the law enforcement dungeon, and he would do her a favor and personally settle these people. Shangwan Luli shrugged helplessly. "Student Yi, it's not that I don't want to help you, but the law enforcer is someone who values the rules the most. You've created trouble in front of him. Even if the great Luo Immortal were to come, he probably wouldn't be able to save you." Hypocrite. Yan Xiaoyi spat out, pretending to be disgusted as she spat a mouthful of saliva onto the ground. Tong Ziqing's aloof face surfaced a sliver of anger. Shangguan Luli, it's not wrong for you to raise a dog, but to let it out to bite people, that's your fault as the owner. Looking at Big Bear's group of mercenaries, who looked at Shangguan Liuli with respect, it wasn't hard to guess the relationship between them and Shangguan Liuli. Many young masters and young ladies of large families like to raise a group of their own followers in the martial world. Even the family heads had their own dark clan forces in the Jianghu. Shangguan Liuli was famous for being arrogant and despotic. Naturally, she had her reasons and her backing. I don't have the time to argue with you. Shangguan Liuli sneered as her sharp eyes stared fiercely at Yiqing Luo. In the academy, you have Master Gui Yu's protection, but outside the academy, you're nothing. She was, after all, the fifth miss of the Shangguan family. But Yiqing Luo was merely a nominal Three Springs sect's young matriarch. Furthermore, Three Springs sect had already declined to the point that even if Yi Tianquang stood here, he would still have to salute her father. Yiqing Luo sneered, outside the academy, who do you think you are? A you who was humiliated in the academy and almost expelled. If it wasn't for third young master Shangguan who helped you, I'm afraid you would have already been chased out of the academy by the director. Shangguan Liuli's face suddenly turned black. Yes, she was almost expelled from the academy by the director. In the academy, her reputation was simply too bad. It was Shangguan Fangyi who tried every possible way to persuade him to agree to some of the director's requests, before he reluctantly agreed to let Shangguan Liuli stay in the academy without informing the family. Otherwise, if this matter were to spread to the ears of the Shangguan family's patriarch. Chapter 749. You. Shangguan Liuli was exasperated. Why did Yiqing Luo know about this? Third brother had obviously said that other than the few of them, no one else knew about this. Shangguan Liuli noticed that the surrounding onlookers were all looking at her. Even the law enforcer was looking at her. His eyes were filled with astonishment as he widened his eyes and whispered to the people beside him, as though they were discussing the reason why she was expelled from the academy. In Shangguan Liuli's eyes, the surrounding people were all looking at her with a ridiculing gaze, ridiculing her. Shangguan Liuli's expression turned ugly as her embarrassment turned into anger as she patted the law enforcer's shoulder. The law enforcer understood her meaning as he cried out sharply. That team of guards didn't bother about these youngsters' struggles as they swarmed forward and started to capture them. Without Long Yunjian or Yiqing Luo's orders, those youngsters didn't dare to casually make a move. But it didn't say that they couldn't hide. Hence, the entire marketplace had turned into a huge scene of chasing each other. A total of 30 overguards were running all over the place. 10 over youngsters dressed in black seemed as though they were playing with those guards. These youngsters were after all young, and as they ran, they started to have the intention to tease them. Immediately following that, those 30 over armored guards were tossed left and right by these youngsters. When those armored guards landed on the ground, it gave off an extremely crisp sound. The onlookers burst into laughter. They couldn't help but admire that this group of young lads and young ladies were really fearless. Looking at the guards who had fallen onto the ground, it was mixed with the laughter from the crowd. The law enforcer and Shangguan Liuli's expressions changed. Especially the law enforcer, his face felt a burning sensation. His body turned stiff as he tried his best to suppress the urge to slap these youngsters to death. These youngsters were simply too daring. All of them totally disregarded him, the law enforcer. He was a dignified law enforcer. Who didn't have a fawning expression when they saw him? When had they ever suffered such humiliation? Good. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. This law enforcer shall deal with you bunch of reckless brats. Saying that, the law enforcer's palm moved as he struck towards those youngsters' direction. Billowing energy, the imposing manner was like a rainbow. The surrounding air and Xian qi condensed, forming a huge vortex. The airflow fluctuated, covering the sky and covering the earth, covering all the youths. The law enforcer has personally taken action. These children are really too insensible. They deserve to die for going against the law enforcers. As expected of the law enforcer. Look at this palm energy. This strength. The surrounding onlookers naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity to flatter him. Even if he felt pity for these children and felt that it was a pity, he would definitely not say anything to help them. Seeing that the palm energy was about to engulf the youths in front of them, everyone's nerves were stretched taut. Bang! With a loud bang, wherever the palm wind passed, the stalls exploded. The ground cracked, and countless gravel and items on the stalls flew in all directions. Dust billowed throughout the area. The onlookers and the youths couldn't help but cough. It was extremely uncomfortable to choke on the dust. Hearing so many people coughing, the enforcer retracted his palms arrogantly. "Sir Law Enforcer, something's not right. That slut has disappeared." Shengguan Liuli narrowed her eyes as she viciously scanned the surroundings but didn't discover Yiqing Luo's figure. Her words had just ended when she saw the dust dispersing. A petite figure raised her head and puffed out her chest, standing in front of the 10 over youngsters. Her long hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall, moving without any wind. Chapter 750. She was just standing there. Delicate and small, peerlessly beautiful. But there was a kind of majestic aura, as though everything around her was under her control. The law enforcer was stunned. His eyes widened and his expression was extremely ugly. This girl actually blocked his palm strike. He was an earth-profound third-grade cultivator. No matter how he looked at this girl, she was at most a mystic profound cultivator. How could she possibly block his palm strike? She is an influential figure in the Heavenly Academy, yellow profound 9th grade, but her skills are surprisingly good. She definitely has a magic weapon on her. Shengguan Liuli, who was standing behind him, said hatefully. Shengguan Liuli absolutely didn't believe it. A yellow profound 9th grade cultivator was able to fight evenly with 2 cold-faced instructors. Even Yiqing Qian, who had advanced to the earth profound realm, was not her opponent. Was it possible? The only explanation was only one. Yiqing Luo had an unknown magic weapon on her, which had been helping her. Magic weapon. Was it the magic weapon that Shengguan Liuli mentioned earlier? The law enforcer narrowed his sinister eyes, a trace of greed flashed past his eyes. What kind of magic weapon could allow a yellow profound 9th grade cultivator to block a palm strike from an earth profound 3rd grade cultivator? Looking at the 2 people in front of her, their eyes were filled with hatred, unable to conceal the greed in the depths of their eyes. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into a bloodthirsty sneer. She cracked her fingers. "Law enforcer, you shouldn't have laid your hands on them." When the last word, hand, was uttered, the figure of the woman who was kneading his hands suddenly disappeared. Just like how she dealt with Brother Xiong's technique, it was as though she had blended into the air. The law enforcer's reaction speed and Brother Xiong's were 2 different levels. The law enforcer quickly released his perception, searching for Yiqing Luo's direction. Suddenly, his eyes flashed. Cheap lass, she was indeed a little tender. The law enforcer sneered as he raised his leg and gave a whirlwind kick, kicking towards the direction of his side. Ah! With a blood-curdling scream, a petite body flew backward and smashed heavily onto the ground. The law enforcer's complacent smile had not completely filled his entire face, when he heard Brother Xiong's brothers shouting in panic, "5th miss! 5th miss! What happened to Shengguan Liuli?" The law enforcement officer turned his head in confusion and was about to look in the direction of the Big Bear brothers. Suddenly, he felt a chill down his spine. Soon after, he heard the girl's light laughter. "Where are you looking?" The girl's voice was clear and sweet. But in the ears of the law enforcement officers, it sounded like a ghost demanding their lives. She. When did she get behind him? Who was the person he just kicked? Before this thought could form in his mind, he felt a movement in his head. The law enforcer clearly heard a crisp, "Gotcha" sound coming from his neck. His body rolled a few times in the air and landed heavily on the ground. Law enforcer. The guards who had fallen to the ground after being teased by the youths struggled to get up and ran towards the enforcers. A few guards stumbled and helped the enforcer up. The enforcer's face was pale, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. His face, looking to the right, could not move. The slightest movement of his muscles was followed by a bone-piercing pain. How pathetic. Law enforcer, when people reach a certain age, they have to accept their old age. Yiqing Luo crossed her arms as she stood on the same spot. Her long curly lashes were like butterfly wings fluttering, looking extremely innocent and pure. The law enforcer was so infuriated that a mouthful of old blood was about to gush out of his heart. His entire body was trembling. The more he trembled, the more pain his dislocated neck was in. Chapter 751. It's you. You're the one who cheated. The enforcer's forehead was filled with cold sweat as his facial features contorted in pain. Although he was the market's enforcer. But in terms of status, he naturally couldn't be compared to the four great aristocratic families. How could he afford to offend the Shengguan family? Xiong Da's group of people were precisely the followers that Shengguan Fangyi and Shengguan Liuli had raised. He wanted to please the Shengguan clan, and because of this, whenever Big Brother Xiong and his men committed any crimes in the marketplace, he would take the blame for them. Now that he heard Yiqing Luo was going to tell the Shengguan family about him kicking Shengguan Luli. His position as the enforcer was probably going to be taken away. Yiqing Luo spread out her hands. "Which eye of yours saw me cheating? Did I use your leg to kick Shengguan Luli, or did I control your soul to force you to kick Shengguan Luli?" The crowd couldn't help but burst out laughing. Telling lies with a straight face, they only admired Yiqing Luo. Ginger is indeed spicier with age. Your ability to distort black and white is so powerful. Pfft. At this moment, the enforcer couldn't hold it in as he spat out a mouthful of blood. Age was not only a woman's secret. It was also a man's reverse scale. Especially those who were in high positions, they were used to enjoying the high and mighty days. Every time he thought of his age, he might have to give up his position tomorrow and so on, he would feel an inexplicable sense of panic. The enforcer was already over 50 years old and thought that he was old but strong, and could still stay in this position for another 10 years. But unfortunately, Yiqing Luo had repeatedly used his age to talk about this. Who could tolerate this? After settling these two people who were blocking the way, Yiqing Luo didn't want to waste any more of her brother's time as she called out for everyone to set off. Whoever dares to let them leave the market, this enforcer will seal the entire market and none of you will be able to leave. The enforcer was filled with anger. How could he let Yiqing Luo and the rest leave? Otherwise, he would really not be able to explain himself after he kicked Shengguan Luli. No matter what, he could not let Yiqing Luo and the rest leave. The other spectators were simply standing around watching. How could they get shot? Looking at the enforcer's uncontrollable anger and resentful look, they knew that the enforcer was really angry. If Yiqing Luo and the others were to leave, they would be trapped in the marketplace by the law enforcers. The onlookers were furious at the law enforcer's request. But he was still forced by reality, so no matter what, he couldn't let Yiqing Luo and the others leave. There was strength in numbers. This sentence was indeed a truth. Thousands of merchants, adventurers and whatnot surrounded them tightly. The World Group's mercenaries' faces turned extremely ugly. He had seen shameless people, but he had never seen someone so shameless. What kind of law enforcer was this? His face was so big that he had nowhere to put it. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as she narrowed her eyes and swept a glance at the surrounding people. Teaching Big Bear and the enforcers a lesson was what they deserved. But these merchants and adventurers were innocent. All they did was watch from the sidelines and say a few words. If they really led a group of brothers to fight with these merchants and adventurers, they would still be the ones in the wrong in the end. Moreover, he had exhausted all his strength early in the morning. The effect of the following training would be greatly reduced. Their holiday was only 3 days. It definitely couldn't be wasted in the hands of such a senseless person. Want to make peace with the enforcers? Forget it. It was too disgusting, so he couldn't do it even if he ignored his conscience. It's only been a month and the enforcer's arrogance has become even more arrogant. Since when did the marketplace become the enforcer's territory? Suddenly, a young man's clear voice was heard from outside the crowd. Chapter 752. I'm very curious. Who gave you the guts to bully the mercenary groups passing through the marketplace and order the customers and merchants in the marketplace? That person scoffed lightly, his tone filled with disdain and ridicule. A youth dressed in a blue robe walked over with steady steps. That delicate and immature face was filled with solemnity. Young master, the law enforcer, who had a sinister expression on his face, turned pale when he saw who it was. He anxiously wanted to turn his head and face the person who had just arrived so that he could explain the reason to him. However, the moment he moved his head, he felt a heart-wrenching pain in his neck. That man totally didn't bother about the law enforcer who was howling in pain, as he took quick steps towards Yiqing Luo. Finally, he stood in front of Yiqing Luo and revealed a smile. Vice Group Leader, Mo Han Shang has returned to the team. This person was none other than the Mercenary Association's young master, Mo Han Shang. Welcome back. Yiqing Luo gazed at the young man's delicate and exquisite face as her lips curled into a smile. Seeing Mo Han Shang appear, she finally heaved a sigh of relief. If possible, she didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Yiqing Luo had always believed that it was better to make a friend or ally than to become an enemy. As the saying goes, righteousness is the most important thing in Jianghu. Right now, the World Mercenary Group's reputation was already resounding enough. Yiqing Luo wouldn't let the World Group really become the target of public criticism. If Mo Han Shang was able to resolve this matter peacefully, then everything would be fine. The enforcer's face was ashen as he looked at Mo Han Shang and Yiqing Luo, as his ears kept ringing. Did he hear wrongly? That wasn't an illusion, right? What did the young master of the mercenary guild just call that lowly girl? Vice Commander. Return to the team. What does that mean? The guard supporting him said in a hoarse voice, Lord Enforcer, young Master Mo, he seems to have joined a newly established mercenary group last month. That mercenary group is the mercenary group that everyone has been talking about recently. In other words, these young boys and girls. The influential figure that swept the entire mercenary world a month ago, the World Mercenary Group. There were handsome men and beautiful women, and the members were all teenagers. Right, it was none other than these people in front of him. He didn't expect that. He didn't realize this. The law enforcement officer wanted to die. How could he be so blind to offend young Master Mo just to please Shangguan Liuli? As a result, the law enforcement officers started to hate Shangguan Liuli. Young Master Mo, today's matter isn't my fault, it's it's fifth Miss Shangwan, she intentionally instructed. The enforcer knelt down in front of Mo Han Shang with a plop, not caring about his dislocated cervical vertebra, as he spilled out Shangwan Liuli's matters. Fifth Miss Shangwan felt that Vice Group Leader Yi had a heaven-defying magical artifact on him, so she intentionally arranged for Big Xiong's mercenaries to take action on the World Group. This subordinate was also forced. I plead for young Master Mo to show mercy. What nonsense are you spouting? Shangwan Liuli clutched her chest and pointed at the law enforcement officer with resentment in her eyes as she scolded, "It's obvious that you were greedy and wanted me to cooperate with you." The enforcer kowtowed desperately, denying Shangwan Liuli's words. Yiqing Luo and the others really didn't have the mood to watch a dog-biting dog show. Moreover, their bite was simply too painful to the eyes. Law enforcement officer, the Mercenary Association specially set up the enforcers and guards in the marketplace, so that you can maintain the peace in the marketplace, and not to give you the capital to put on airs. Chapter 753. Last month, when the marketplace was massacred, when there was a bloodbath, where were you? Mo Han Shang saw the enforcer kowtowing, complaining that he knew he was in the wrong as his brows creased even tighter, with a look of annoyance. His height was around the same height as Yiqing Luo, with a delicate face, giving off an indistinguishable feeling. But now that he was standing in front of the enforcer, that overbearing imposing manner made the enforcer not dare to lift his head. The enforcer didn't dare to respond. Mo Han Shang continued, "You said, you led 130 law enforcers to count the number of people in your secret passageway. On that day of the bloodbath, there wasn't a single law enforcer in the marketplace, not a single one." The enforcer shivered in fear. Last month after the marketplace was massacred, the Mercenary Association's president wanted to replace the enforcer. But the other elders joined hands to make the enforcer stay. They wanted to give him another chance. But seeing this scene, if Mo Han Shang still believed this so-called enforcer, he would be an idiot. 130 law enforcers. So coincidentally, they went to count the number of people. Even if they really counted the number of people, they needed to count the entire marketplace. Thousands of people had been massacred cleanly before they finished counting. They were obviously greedy for life and afraid of death. This young patriarch will hand this matter over to father to handle. Enforcer, you'd better behave yourself. The enforcer's pupils dilated. Shangwan Luli, who was by the side, had just heaved a sigh of relief when she heard Mo Han Shang's cold voice. As for fifth Miss Shangwan, at such a young age, she already knew how to instigate her own people to lay hands on her own classmate in the marketplace, all because of a so-called magic weapon. He sneered as his eyes were filled with disdain, not to mention that Vice Group Leader doesn't have the so-called magic weapon. Even if she did, that has nothing to do with you. To have such vicious thoughts, fifth Miss Shangwan's upbringing is really beautiful. Tomorrow, this young patriarch will personally head over to the Shangwan clan, to have a good discussion with Patriarch Shangwan on how to educate his children. Saying that, Mo Han Shang turned his head and looked at Yiqing Luo, Vice Group Leader. "Let's go. Young Patriarch Mo, please spare my life. Young Patriarch Mo, please spare my life. Young Patriarch Mo, this matter is Lu Li's fault. Lu Li will apologize to you." My father sighed. "We won't disturb young Patriarch Mo any longer." The expressions of the enforcers and Shangwan Liuli changed drastically, and they immediately pleaded for leniency. However, Mo Han Shang totally didn't bother about them. Directly together with Yiqing Luo and the others, they flocked out of the marketplace. The entire marketplace was filled with sighs. Looking at the law enforcement officers and Shangwan Liuli who were kneeling on the ground, they shook their heads and sighed. Who would have thought that today's show would have so many twists and turns? He didn't expect that even the young master of the mercenary guild would appear. TSK, So it turns out that the mercenary group of those young boys and girls was the world mercenary group that was rumored to have been promoted to the bronze rank in one day. It truly lived up to its reputation. No wonder he was so awesome and wasn't afraid of the law enforcers. More than 90 people walked out of the market in a mighty manner. There were actually 2 or 3 mercenary groups following behind him. There were at least 200 to 300 people in each mercenary group. Together, there were more than 1,000 people. This was the only road leading to the mercenary union. It was originally very spacious and could accommodate at least 100 people. At this moment, it was extremely crowded. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as she glanced sideways at Imo Han Shang. Han Shang, why are there so many mercenary groups heading towards the mercenary union today? Could it be that there's a new mission? In the marketplace, she saw at least 10 over mercenary groups dressed in different attire. Chapter 754. You don't know. This was not Imo Han Shang's reply, but Qiao Jin. He looked at Yiqing Luo in astonishment. Today is the Mercenary Association's big day, you actually don't know? Big day. Yiqing Luo was at a loss. Every third holiday in the Mercenary Association, they will hold a day of random mission distribution event. Imo Han Shang continued and explained seriously, this event is to promote the mercenary group's unity, enthusiasm, adventurous nature, etc. Random mission distribution event. The Mercenary Association, which looked so strict, would also hold such a joyous event. What a sudden change in style. Yiqing Luo suddenly thought of something. This event was suggested by you. Imo Han Shang bashfully scratched the back of his head. I'm aiming at the mercenary group's common problem and came up with this event. Not only can it help the Mercenary Association build momentum, it indeed can let the various mercenary groups have a sense of competition. The mercenary groups have been established for a long time. It could easily turn into a kind of work mode. Just like those old members of the Blue Dragon mercenary group. The past heroic dreams had all been erased by various missions, that kind of passion. And at this moment, a random mission activity appeared. It easily ignited their curiosity. Because of the unknown, so they would be intensely interested. At the same time of interest, the Mercenary Association would also give out double the reward to show encouragement. Not to mention the interest towards the unknown, just this double reward would attract many mercenary groups to participate. Because the rewards from the Mercenary Association, especially the honor points, were simply too hard to obtain. These mercenary groups all want to participate in the random mission distribution event. Yiqing Luo turned her head to look at the 3 groups behind her, and not too far ahead, there were quite a number of mercenary groups. These missions, roughly what kind of missions are there? According to the mercenary group's grade, it will be randomly selected. Imo Han Shang mentioned the event which he had painstakingly designed, as his eyes were filled with smiles. For example, ordinary mercenary group, the random mission scope, is roughly low-grade experience points and rare missions, as well as intermediate-grade experience points. Bronze plate mercenary group, the random mission scope, is roughly low to medium-grade experience points and rare missions. There are also a small number of mercenary groups who may draw high-grade experience points. Silver plate mercenary group, the random mission scope is the same as others, and there is a probability of drawing complex grade experience points and rare complex grade mission. Complex grade. Yiqing Luo raised her eyebrows in puzzlement. Then what happens if the mission that you've drawn cannot be completed? Although they were randomly selected based on their level, however, if he were to win the lottery and draw a rare mission of the highest level, he would not be able to complete it. He could not just bite the bullet and go to his death. Leader can choose to accept or reject, but, if you give up, 100 honor points will be deducted from the mercenary group. Imo Han Shang said seriously and solemnly. Moreover, a mercenary group only has 2 rounds of random qualifications. If they were to give up on both rounds, then this round of random event, they would lose their permanent qualification. That was a good rule. Yiqing Luo turned her head towards Long Yunjian. Do you think we should give it a try? Long Yunjian touched the guild leader's medal and glanced at it. At present, we have a total of 191 honor points. It is only enough for us to give up on one mission. Shouldn't have drawn out any weird missions. Yiqing Luo's last word was specially dragged out, as her vision looked towards Imo Han Shang, blinking her eyes, right? Chapter 755. Just as she was saying that, a gentleman's voice was heard from behind, the World Mercenary Group. You don't mind joining us, right? Not waiting for Yiqing Luo and the others to respond, another glib voice was heard, me too, it's on the way. Following that, there was a lady's sweet voice, since the few group leaders are going together, you don't mind if I'm alone, right? Yiqing Luo and the rest were at the back of the group, and when they stopped and turned their heads, they saw two men and a lady walking towards them in quick steps. One of the men was dressed in a dark green long robe and looked to be around 25 to 26 years old. He looked like a well-behaved and fair young master. Yiqing Luo had never liked this type of man. An overly refined and well-behaved man would instead look pretentious. Like Si Yanmu, like Ling Fengying. These people were people who could stab a knife into your heart with a gentle smile. Looking at the man's side, it was a tall and burly man in a black magua. He had a full beard and she couldn't tell his age. Beside the two men was a young lady dressed in a peach-colored short skirt. She was about 15 to 16 years old, and that peach-colored short skirt made the young lady look like a peach blossom. The young lady's dressing was extremely simple. Her peach-colored short skirt was clean and nimble, which was convenient for movement. Her hip-length long hair was tied up by a peach-colored hairband. It was slightly messy, but it showed off the young lady's youthful vivacity. The only ornament on her was the peach-colored gauze band on her wrist. These three people, weren't they the group leaders of those three mercenary groups? These three people. What were they trying to do? Yiqing Luo and the rest stopped in their tracks as they waited for the three of them to walk over. I'm Yan Zhan, the group leader of Invincible Mercenary Group, Bronze Plate Mercenary Group. The man in the dark green long robe introduced himself first. That tall and burly man touched his full beard as he laughed loudly, me. I'm called Shen Qin. This name is too artistic and doesn't suit my image. Everyone calls me Big Beard. Just call me that. I'm not some group leader, just the executive group leader of the Blood Demon Mercenary Group. A Silver Plate Mercenary Group. The woman's lively eyes looked at Yiqing Luo for some time and gave an adorable smile. Student Yi, my name is Tao Tao. You can call me Tao Zi. I'm the group leader of Peach Blossom 3000 Mercenary Group. Our group are all women. Classmate. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes in astonishment. Peach grabbed the corner of her clothes, her curved eyebrows looked very cute. Student Yi may not know me, I'm also a student of the Heavenly Academy, in the same class as Student Yi Fengyu. I often hear Student Yi Fengyu mention you. Low Profound Class 2 students? Yiqing Luo's peripheral vision glanced at the group of mercenaries in front as her brows creased slightly. Should she consider giving these young servants some ways to disguise themselves? The world was such a small place, one could always run into one after another. If they recognized that they were students from the devil class, it would be troublesome. Classmate Yi, I admire you very much. My wish is to be like you, to become a strong person, to not be afraid of anything, and to always be full of hope. After saying that, Peach shyly curled up her fingers. Yiqing Luo could tell that this lady's every word came from the bottom of her heart. A person's eyes cannot deceive a person's heart. Peach's eyes were limpid and clean. Her eyes were filled with adoration and love for Qin Mu. Yi-Qing Luo laughed softly, so it's little Yu's classmate. Little Yu is not very sensible. If he commits any mistakes in the class, you can tell me any time. Peach nodded her head vigorously, her brows raised in joy. Yes, my goddess. Wait, goddess. Chapter 756. Student Yifeng Yu likes you as his sister very much. Every time he mentioned you, his brows would dance and he would be in high spirits, even his eyes would light up. As though they had found a common topic, Peach's mouth couldn't stop as she squeezed the two people behind her. Yan Zhan and Bearded Man totally had no chance to step forward. They specially came over, especially to build a relationship with Yi-Qing Luo. After all, this the World Mercenary Group, although they looked like a bunch of young men and young ladies, but their ability was there, and they even had the young patriarch of the Mercenary Association. Who could deny their influence in the mercenary world? But this 3,000 Peach Blossom Mercenary Group leader had been forcefully holding onto Yi-Qing Luo's arm, so they didn't even have a chance to interrupt. Yan Zhan's gentle brows revealed some impatience. Bearded Man wasn't a patient person. They had already walked for 100 miles and Peach Blossom Group leader was still holding onto Yi-Qing Luo, chatting about everything under the heavens. He and Yan Zhan were following behind, feeling extremely awkward. How could Bearded Man endure it? He directly walked up and grabbed Peach's arm, casually pushing her back. We're all here to befriend the world group, can't you give me a chance to speak? Bearded Man was a typical muscular man. His figure was tall and sturdy. This push of his was very little to him, but if it was placed on a delicate young lady, how could Peach maintain her balance? Her feet were unsteady as she fell downwards. Be careful. An anxious voice was heard and immediately, Peach's petite body was caught in a wide embrace. Peach was slightly stunned as she was enclosed in that warm embrace, which was extremely hard. His body didn't have the usual sweaty stench of an ordinary man. But it was fresh and clean, an extremely soothing smell. Peach raised her head as her long and thick lashes fluttered, meeting with a pair of resplendent starry eyes, so dazzling that she felt a little dizzy. From this angle, against the light, the man who was hugging her had a layer of hazy radiance on his features. This face, although it wasn't outstanding and wasn't considered handsome or good-looking, but it had a unique charm, especially that pair of eyes, which could tug at one's heartstrings. Miss Tao, what's the matter with you? Are you all right? Xiao Jin saw that she didn't say a word and assumed that she was frightened by Bearded Man's rough actions, as he released her hand. Following that, he walked in front of Bearded Man and tugged his collar. How can you lay your hands on such a delicate beauty? Are you still a man? Bearded Man's face instantly turned red. I just gave her a light push. Who asked that last to monopolize your group leader? We're here to make friends, not to be followers. No, it's fine. Peach blushed and moved away from Xiao Jin's side. She actually. Such an ordinary-looking man. Moreover, he was such an ordinary-looking man. Seeing him reprimand the Bearded Man for her sake, Taozi blushed even more. She pursed her lips shyly and said, I'm fine. Thank you for saving me. Xiao Jin let go of Big Beard and clapped his hands. When he turned to look at Peach, he revealed a gentle smile. No, Miss Tao, you don't have to thank him. That bastard Jin's wish is to be a hero and save the beauty. You fulfilled his wish, so he should thank you. A clear voice directly interrupted Xiao Jin's words. Yan Xiaoyi stepped forward with a cold smile on her face. She reached out and grabbed Xiao Jin's arm. Chapter 757. Slut Jin, get lost. Yan Xiaoyi's expression changed immediately. She lifted her leg and kicked him away, rushing towards the brothers in front. No matter how Qiao Jin shouted, Yan Xiaoyi did not turn back. He only stopped when he reached Xiao Bo's side. Seeing Yan Xiaoyi ignoring him and talking to Xiao Bo about something, Qiao Jin scratched his head. How strange. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into a helpless smile as she shook her head. Jin Zi, let me give you 2 words. What? You deserve it. Why do I deserve it? Qiao Jin's eyes widened as he grumbled indignantly. I didn't do anything to her. I didn't provoke her. How did I? Before she could finish her words, Yiqing Luo couldn't be bothered with the teasing Qiao Jin as she shifted her vision towards Yan Zhan and Bearded Man. You want to befriend group leader? That's right, we want to make friends with you. The bearded man nodded profusely, but as soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt that something was amiss. Yan Zhan frowned. Aren't you the leader of the World Mercenary Group? I'm not. Yiqing Luo pointed at Long Yunzhan. Group leader is over there. Long Yunzhan raised his expressionless face and looked over coldly. Yan Zhan and the bearded man shivered and laughed dryly. Oh my god, little kids nowadays have such a strong aura. With one look, one could tell that he wasn't someone who was easy to get along with. Ever since the World Mercenary Group stepped into the marketplace, they had never seen the World Group leader speak a single word. Those mercenary youngsters also listened to Yiqing Luo's commands. It was no wonder that they mistook their leader for someone else. Our Blood Fiend Mercenary Group wishes to befriend the World Group. It doesn't matter who the leader is. What's important is that we, the Blood Fiends, admire your team. Big Beard shouted loudly. That's right. Yan Zhan smiled warmly. You're all so young, yet you're able to establish your own team and develop it so rapidly. You're indeed young heroes. There's no need to be so courteous. Time is of the essence, so let's hurry over to the Mercenary Association first. If we're late, we won't be able to take part in the activity. Yiqing Luo smiled as she changed the topic. It was good to have another friend. However, they were also clear about what kind of friends they should make and what kind of friends they shouldn't. For example, Yan Zhan. He looked cultured and refined, and his speech was also very refined. But from his gaze and the occasional expressions of emotions, Yiqing Luo was able to determine that this person called Yan Zhan was arrogant, conceited, and extremely ambitious. Rather than saying that he wanted to make friends with the World Group, it would be better to say that he wanted to use the World Group to complete a certain objective of his. To be friends with this kind of person, you must always be able to protect his interests. Otherwise, once they lost their value, Yan Zhan might very well sell them out in exchange for greater benefits. As for the other bearded man, he was a straightforward person and didn't have a big heart. However, he was too inflexible, and he had an extraordinary dedication and passion for his mercenary team. Of course, this was not to say that this was bad. Yiqing Luo was the same, she had the same persistence and passion towards her own team. They all had the attitude of, no matter what's right or wrong, my brother is right. If this sort of shielding really hurt the other party's team, a second ago, they were still calling each other brothers, but in the next second, a knife could be placed on the other party's neck. Because of this, Yiqing Luo didn't intend to have too deep of a relationship with these two people. After all, the youths in her team had never stepped foot in the outside world and were too naive. Chapter 758. Miss Yi, are you going to take part in the random mission activities? Why don't we form a team? Yan Zhan sent out an invitation. Bearded man stroked his beard as he laughed loudly. Right, let's form a team. Let's 4 teams do it together, and after we take on the mission, we'll work together. We have sufficient manpower and our ability is right there, so there's no need to worry about drawing a mission that we can't complete. That's a good idea. Perhaps we can spare some time to take on the second random mission. Yan Zhan nodded his head in agreement. When Yiqing Luo heard that, her long and narrow eyes rose slightly as her peripheral vision swept past the both of them. Then which team should we start with? Yan Zhan and Bearded Man replied in unison, of course we'll start with me. Before they could finish their words, the both of them seemed to have realized something as they exchanged glances and lowered their eyelids awkwardly. After some time, Yan Zhan found the right words. What I mean is, let's start with the most complicated mission. Anyway, we have a lot of people, so no matter how complicated the mission is, we'll be able to complete it in the shortest time. Bearded Man nodded his head repeatedly. But when the both of them raised their eyes and met Yiqing Luo's face, they instantly felt a chill down their spines. This peerlessly beautiful, dainty and adorable young lady had a faint smile hanging on her lips as her eyes were curved, narrow and enchanting. She looked so innocent and harmless. But inexplicably, it made the both of them feel a sense of trepidation. If I didn't remember wrongly, earlier young Master Shen mentioned that your Blood Demon Mercenaries group is a Silver Plate mercenary group. That means that your random mission is very likely to draw a complicated great experience mission or some other complicated rare mission. Yiqing Luo's tone were gentle and slow, not at all rude. Bearded Man's expression stiffened slightly. Of course, the probability of a complicated grade mission is very low. But even if you draw a high-grade experience mission, it's very likely that with our 3 teams, we can only accompany you to fight for this mission. Standing on a bystander's point of view and lending a helping hand, it's not impossible. But I also have my team and my brothers. I can't possibly drag my own brothers to accompany you to do something impossible. Yan Zhan coughed a few times and hid the hostility in his eyes. He smiled gently and said, Miss Yi is thoughtful. Peach snorted coldly and stepped forward, hooking Yiqing Luo's arm. Her pretty face was full of sarcasm. Stop it, all of you have been in the mercenary world for several years, why are you pretending to be a newbie? What do you mean? Xiao Jin could tell that there was a hidden meaning in her words. He moved forward and asked in confusion. When Peach's gaze met Xiao Jin's, she shifted her gaze away in a somewhat flustered manner. Her cheeks were slightly red as she lowered her eyelashes and said, the two of them want to join forces and trick you into doing random missions for their mercenary group. Looking at the Peach in this state, Yiqing Luo's heart thumped hard. Her attention was completely not on the matter of Yan Zhan and the Bearded Man's deception. His thoughts drifted to the other side. Cough cough, could it be, Peach really fell in love with Xiao Jin at first sight? In this other world, strength was the most important factor, and appearance was the second factor. Would a woman fall in love with Xiao Jin at first sight? The world was too fantastical. One must know that Xiao Jin's looks were absolutely not good-looking. Especially in the world mercenary group, which was filled with handsome men and beautiful women, that face of his seemed even more ordinary. Looking at Peach, her appearance was delicate and lovely, captivating even the birds and beasts, overshadowing the moon and flowers, and her character was quick-witted and adorable. Looking at Peach's dressing again, as well as the 200 over female mercenary group which she had established, her family background was absolutely not bad. Whatever type of man she wanted, it was just a matter of curling her fingers. Chapter 759. Qing Luo. The voice beside her ears made Yiqing Luo abruptly regain her senses. Her long lashes fluttered as her eyes regained their luster. Earlier, what did you guys say? Did she miss something strange? Why? Peach, Xiao Jin and Long Yun Zhan were staring at her without blinking. And Yan Zhan and Bearded Man's expressions were so ugly. Qing Luo, at such a serious moment, how could you get lovesick and think of Di Tian? Qiao Jin hooked Yiqing Luo's shoulder as he teased her with an arc. Think of what Dmo Xian. She was obviously thinking of him, Qiao Jin's luck with women. Since he dared to tease her. Regarding the possibility of Peach falling in love with him at first sight, she wouldn't tell him. Let's see how this fellow with no EQ would deal with the conflict between him and Yan Xiaoyi. Student Yiqing Luo, I'm analyzing that the both of them want to make use of the World Mercenary Group's evidence. Peach stuck out her tongue at Yan Zhan and Bearded Man. Let me explain to you the rules of random missions. The time limit for random missions is 3 days and the time limit for drawing the mission will end at midnight today. Saying that, Peach specially made a 3-day hand gesture. And the range of the random mission could possibly be in some corner of the West Continent or some dangerous place. Just the journey back and forth would take at least half a day or at least a day. We might not even be able to complete the first random mission on time, so don't even mention about how we still have time and can take on the second mission, etc. Such a ridiculous topic. Saying that, Peach gave a cold harumph as she looked at Yan Zhan in disdain. If I didn't guess wrongly, group leader Yan used the same method to coax Bearded Man, and on seeing that our student Yiqing Luo is a newly established mercenary group and doesn't know the rules of random missions, he tried to coax her to help your mercenary group to complete the mission. Yan Zhan's refined face flushed red instantly. Bearded Man's eyes widened. He was indeed attracted by Yan Zhan's words and was prepared to work together with Yan Zhan's invincible mercenary group. Following that, the both of them saw the World Mercenary Group's magnificent feat in the marketplace. He thought that this group of young people who didn't know the rules would easily take the bait. He immediately followed them. He had not expected. Not only did Yan Zhan want to deceive the World Mercenary Group, he even wanted to deceive him. The Bearded Man's chest was filled with rage. The flames in his eyes danced as he glared fiercely at Yan Zhan. In the end, Yan Zhan was only the leader of a bronze plate mercenary group. Although the mercenary group had been around for almost 3 years, the reason why the mercenary group was able to develop to where it was now was entirely because of his brain, his cleverness, and his gentle and refined appearance. He was able to gain the trust of many people, and from there, they could make some small moves. But to this day, it was only a bronze plate mercenary group. Big Beardy was the executive leader of Silver Mercenary Group. He could not afford to offend them. In his panic, Yan Zhan pointed the spearhead at Peach. You are talking nonsense. If it's really as you said, then wouldn't you be following us to get close to Miss Yi and even trying to establish a relationship with Miss Yi? Wouldn't you be trying to make use of the World Mercenary Group? Peach rolled her eyes and her pretty face was full of pride. My Peach Blossom 3000 Mercenary Group doesn't do any fighting or killing. We are mainly responsible for gathering information. In other words, she had more or less figured out Yan Zhan's reputation and the hookups he had done in the past. Yan Zhan staggered a few steps back. He opened his mouth and wanted to refute something. Chapter 760. It's because I know what kind of person you are that I specially followed you over. I cannot let you deceive my goddess. Peach raised her head complacently as a smile flashed past her eyes, but I have to thank you. It's you who gave me the courage to speak to my goddess. Yiqing Luo, wait a minute, this goddess, what the hell was that? And this voice, this tone, this expression, what was going on? Yiqing Luo wailed in her heart, her sexual orientation was out. Right. Positive. Constant. No. Do. 100. Together. Amen. Let Peach fall in love with Qiao Jin at first sight, to see through his inner handsomeness. Peach's words made Yan Zhan's face turn ashen. His body tensed up as he stared fiercely at Peach, wishing that he could tear that mouth into several pieces. However, Peach remained unmoved. She was still smiling like a flower as she whispered something to Yiqing Luo. Yan Zhan's eyes were overflowing with viciousness as he clenched his fists tightly. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, the bearded man standing beside him suddenly punched his face. A bam was heard and Yan Zhan was unable to react in time as he fell onto the ground. Bearded man's physique was huge and definitely not just for show. When this punch landed, Yan Zhan's delicate little body was totally unable to withstand his devastation. Damn it! Yan Zhan! You even dare to lie to me. If I don't destroy your mercenary group today, I'm not called Bearded Man. Bearded Man was filled with rage as he pressed Yan Zhan onto the ground as he raised his fist and punched him again. Yiqing Luo and the others naturally weren't interested in these two men's fight. At this moment, Yiqing Luo's attention was attracted by Peach's find out news. To have one's own network of informants and to know all the news in the continent was an extremely important step to establish one's own force. For those large-scale mercenary groups, they would split out a portion of their forces to form a network of informants, specially to find out all sorts of news for the mercenary group. Yiqing Luo had naturally thought of establishing such an organization. She intended to wait for the world group to mature a little before discussing this matter. Today, after Peach mentioned it, she had an idea. Group Leader. Executive Group Leader. The Invincible Guild and Blood Demon Guild were still waiting for their guild leader's response when they suddenly saw the two guild leaders fighting each other. He immediately rushed forward and pulled the leaders of both sides apart. Weren't they discussing the cooperation between the two mercenary groups not long ago? Why was it that after roping in the world group, the members of the world group left with that female group and these two group leaders started fighting instead? Raid the Invincible Guild. You even dare to deceive me. The bearded man was aggressive. Idiot. Don't fall for that woman's provocation. Yan Zhan's facial muscles were bruised, and blood was still seeping from the corner of his mouth. He couldn't hide the sarcasm on his face. Those two women are in cahoots with each other. They deliberately teamed up to make us lose the chance to participate in the random mission. You really fell for it and even hit me. Are you stupid? Being reprimanded, the bearded man was a little stunned. Blood Demon Guild's leader behind him creased his brows. What do you mean by this? If you really annihilate my invincible mercenary group today, the two women's plot will succeed. Yan Zhan heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the two muscular and fierce-looking managers had fallen for his trap. However, the expression on his face and the angry tone of his voice remained unchanged. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.